19-year-old man is in custody following the fatal shooting of a 24-year-old woman in Hammond, Louisiana over the weekend. On Sunday night, on the 29th of January, Tory Banks was inside a car at a gas station along Southwest Railway Road with two other men when Jonathan Williams pulled out a gun and shot Tory and then threatened to shoot the other man. Jonathan then ran away, while the other man proceeded to drive Tory to the hospital. While on the way there, at 7:11 p.m, the man flagged down a Hammond police officer near Old Covington Highway and told the officer that Tory had been shot. Tory was taken to the North Oaks Medical Center by ambulance where she later died. Authorities identified Jonathan as a suspect and was found at his home near the shooting location at 11:30 p.m. that night. He was arrested without incident and was booked into the Hammond City Jail on charges of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and illegal discharge of a firearm. Police have not disclosed the motive of the shooting as the investigation into the matter continues. Baton Rouge police in Louisiana are investigating a shooting after two men were found dead in a car early Monday morning. At around 3 a.m. on the 30th of January, authorities responded to a report that a shooter began firing at a vehicle in a parking lot outside the Waffle House, which is open 24 hours, at 10439 Riga Road, before fleeing the scene. When officers arrived, they found two men inside a car that had been fatally shot. They were identified as 33-year-old Leonard Leslie and 37-year-old Horace Watson. The car had dozens of bullet holes in the side windows and doors. Police said the attack is believed to be targeted. Authorities have not publicly released the name of a suspect in connection with the shooting or a possible motive behind the attack. The investigation into the matter continues. A Nashville, Tennessee man has been arrested after his ex-girlfriend was found stabbed to death and crammed inside a plastic container in his closet over the weekend. 28-year-old Dwayne Harrell Jr. has been charged with criminal homicide for the stabbing death of 24-year-old Irene Torres. Dwayne waited for Irene to arrive outside her home at around 2 a.m. on the 29th of January, along 9th Street in Old Hickory, where an argument ensued. Dwayne allegedly confessed to detectives to stabbing her to death in the parking lot and placing her body in the trunk of his car. He then drove his ex-girlfriend's body to his apartment at 865 Bellevue Road, roughly 20 miles away. He wrapped her in a comforter, stuffed her in a plastic container, and hid her inside his closet. Irene's parents raised concerns with the police at around 9 a.m. that morning after checking security footage outside their daughter's residence and saw Dwayne forcibly dragging her away from her home. They told dispatchers that the pair had a history of domestic violence and requested a welfare check on their daughter. When officers went to Dwayne's apartment in search for Irene, Dwayne told them that she was not there and that he hadn't seen her since Friday the 27th of January. Authorities said that Irene's father later went to Dwayne's apartment to confront him of his daughter's whereabouts. When Dwayne told him that she went to a hotel in downtown Nashville, while they both made their way to the Doubletree Downtown Hotel, Dwayne told Irene's father that he fatally stabbed her. Irene's father immediately called police. Dwayne has been held at the Davison County Detention Center without bond. Loved ones paid tribute to Irene on social media following Dwayne's arrest. It's still unbelievable, unreal, sickening, and I'm at loss for words, one friend posted on Facebook. I know anyone that's crossed paths with this beautiful soul can say that she was the most kind person they've ever met. Irene was always the happiest and sweetest person, and could light up the whole room with a smile, another post said. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all, a third friend wrote. There's absolutely no words to describe this feeling. Your spirit, your energy, and your smile are the best parts of you. 47-year-old Barb Butler from York, Nebraska, has been arrested and charged with first-degree murder, use of a firearm to commit a felony, and possession of a firearm by a prohibited person after fatally shooting his wife. At 9:47 p.m. on Monday the 30th of January, York police were dispatched to 84 South Platte Avenue on a reported shooting. Bardo called 911, and when dispatchers asked what the nature of the call was, he said gunshot wound, I'm doing CPR. He then said he was her husband and told the dispatcher I shot her, I'm sorry. Heavy breathing and gurgling noises could be heard in the background. When officers arrived at the residence, they found 46-year-old Stacey Butler unresponsive with multiple gunshot wounds. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Officers cleared the residence and started searching for Bart when they learnt that he was at his wife's brother's home after another call came through to emergency services to tell them where he was. Officers found Bart there, wearing blood-stained clothing, and arrested him. Bart told police he was in his bed in their room, and his wife kept coming into the room, waking him up and talking shit. I just pulled out the gun and started shooting. He told police he attempted CPR, but it didn't work. Bart then told police that he then walked over to Stacey's brother's home to tell him what he did. He's held at the York County Jail on a $3 million bond. Criminal records shows that Bart was convicted of second-degree murder in Maricopa County, Arizona in 2010. A 32-year-old woman and a 45-year-old man from Castlewood, Virginia, are behind bars after a child had part of both of his legs amputated due to frostbite from allegedly living in a cold box trailer. On the 19th of January, Rebecca Bremner and Michael Park of 3060 Gravel Lick Road were charged with felony abuse and neglect. Rebecca was arrested at her home, while Michael was arrested on a fugitive warrant by authorities that same day in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He remains held in Forsyth County while he awaits extradition back to Virginia. The investigation began on the 12th of January after the Russell County Department of Social Services contacted authorities after a boy was transported to a local hospital with severe frostbite to his lower extremities. His feet were black and discolored, and doctors amputated both of his legs beneath the knee to control infection. During an interview, Rebecca told authorities that the victim had been living in a box trailer on the residence property for a couple of months, which had 3 heaters inside. She said that the trailer did not have windows and that the back door goes down, but when shut, you can't get out, and the trailer also has a regular door. Rebecca said the child was given Pop-Tarts and cereal for breakfast, honey buns for snack, and either burgers or spaghetti for food. The trailer had a toilet for the child that was reportedly changed about twice a week, and the boy bathed in an outdoor hot tub. Deputies from Russell County Sheriff's Office found in excess of 40 dogs on the property that seemed to be healthy and well cared for. Following Rebecca's arrest, the Sheriff's Office fed the dogs and patched holes in their fence. Authorities requested that Rebecca surrender her dogs, but she declined and made arrangements through relatives to feed and look after the animals instead. One neighbour, Harold Eugene Osborne, said he had seen a child after he began visiting the property last summer to mow the yard and to take the trash out for Michael. He said one day, a child was coming out of the building and he was limping. Harold said he didn't have much contact with Rebecca, but said that Michael could be harsh and demanding, and that his behaviour was hateful. Rebecca is held at the Southwest Virginia Regional Jail without bond, and is scheduled to appear in court on the 10th of February. Michael also remains held without bond. Authorities did not specify the boy's age or his relationship with the suspects. The investigation into the matter continues. The Russell County Sheriff's Office is investigating a homicide in Hurtsboro, Alabama. At around 11:15 p.m. on the 31st of January, deputies were conducting area checks in the 500 block of Lloyd Street when they found an unresponsive man with multiple gunshot wounds in the parking lot of Candlewood Apartments complex. At 2:05 a.m. on the 1st of February, the Russell County coroner pronounced the man identified as 36-year-old Sammy Lee Pritchard dead. Authorities said that Sammy got into an altercation with 26-year-old Deshandra Shawnees Green in the parking lot before he was fatally shot. Deshandra was arrested on the same day and charged with murder. Sammy's body will be transported to the Alabama Department of Forensic Science in Montgomery for an autopsy. Investigators said that Sammy and Deshandra know each other, but did not disclose how they knew each other or a possible motive behind the attack. No other information has been released as the investigation into the matter continues. Authorities are investigating the fatal shooting of a 21-year-old man in Kansas City, Missouri early this week. At 10:45 p.m. on Tuesday, the 31st of January, police responded to a report of gunfire coming from the area of East 24th Street and Brighton Avenue. When officers arrived, they found 21-year-old Dimitri Carr seated inside a vehicle, suffering from several gunshot wounds, one of which he was shot in the back, which proved to be lethal when he died at the scene before paramedics could arrive to save him. There's no suspect information available from police at this time, and no one's been taken into custody. Anyone with information in the case is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. A 20-year-old man is behind bars and is accused of shooting another man outside a convenience store in Augusta, Georgia last week. On Wednesday, the 1st of February, Richmond County deputies arrested Brandon Safford and charged him with aggravated assault with a weapon and criminal damage to property in the first degree. The shooting occurred at just before 11:30 p.m. on Friday the 27th of January at Circle K located at 3412 Mike Paget Highway. The victim was standing outside the store when a silver sedan pulled up, and a man got out of the passenger side and walked up to the victim when he began firing a handgun. The victim then returned fire. When deputies arrived, they found the 18-year-old victim, whose name remains anonymous, lying in front of the cash counter bleeding from his left arm and left leg. Emergency medical crews were called to the scene to give aid to the victim, and he was taken to the Augusta University Medical Center, where his condition is unknown. A handgun was found in the trash can at the entrance of the store, and bullet casings were found in the parking lot. The store's front windows were also damaged by gunfire. Authorities have not released a possible motive in the shooting. A juvenile is in custody after a man was fatally shot during a home invasion in Milledgeville, Georgia on Thursday morning. At around 12:40 a.m. on the 2nd of February, deputies from the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office responded to a call and a report of a shooting at 145 Black Springs Road. When deputies arrived at the scene, they found 18-year-old Syed Devin Harvey with multiple gunshot wounds. He was rushed to a local hospital, but later succumbed to his injuries. Authorities learnt that multiple people had travelled to Syed's property, and at least one entered the home and started shooting. The teen's family was present during the ordeal, but no one else was injured. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation said they've issued warrants for 2 juveniles. 1 juvenile is in custody, and more arrest warrants are expected. They have not released the names of the suspects at this time. A Sanford, North Carolina man was charged with murder on Thursday after the body of a missing man was found dismembered and covered in concrete in a barrel. The Lee County Sheriff's Office charged 42-year-old Jackie Lamar Bright with the murder of Michael Bradley Cox, who had been reported missing since December. The Sheriff's Office said deputies searched for 2 days across a heavily wooded area of Jackie's property at 1675 Farrell Road, as well as adjoining land, before finding a 55-gallon barrel filled with concrete and suspected human remains. The North Carolina Medical Examiner's Office removed the concrete and found the body, which was positively identified as Michael's remains. Jackie has an extensive criminal history and was released from prison in May. He was on parole when he was taken into custody for drug charges on the 6th of January. He bonded out of jail and was arrested again on the 11th of January before being charged with the murder of Michael. Jackie is in custody at the North Carolina Department of Corrections. The investigation's ongoing and additional charges are expected. A 29-year-old Maryland man is behind bars after his wife was found dead inside their apartment earlier this week. At 12:44 a.m. on Wednesday the 1st of February, Dennis Morris Hinnant Jr. walked into the Rockville City Police Station and requested to speak with a homicide detective. He allegedly told officers that he killed his wife and that they'll find a body inside their residence on the 8800 block of Lanier Drive in Silver Spring. Officers responded to the apartment to perform a welfare check and found 28-year-old Tarisha Pendarvis with trauma to her body. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Dennis is charged with first-degree murder and is held at the Montgomery County Jail without bond. Authorities have not disclosed a possible motive in the attack. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Baltimore will conduct an autopsy to officially determine the cause and manner of death. The investigation is ongoing. 39-year-old Van Roy Evan Smith is behind bars and is accused of striking a cyclist with his car before stabbing the victim to death in Dana Point, California. At around 3 p.m. on Wednesday the 1st of February, 58-year-old Dr. Michael John Mamone was riding along the intersection of Pacific Coast Highway and Crown Valley Parkway when he was hit from behind by a white Lexus driven by Van Roy. Witnesses said that after the suspect struck the cyclist, the driver exited the car brandishing a knife and inflicted more serious injuries on the victim, stabbing him several times and at least once in the back. The motive behind the attack remains unclear, and police said the 2 men were strangers. However, witnesses also claim that Van Roy was initially holding a BB gun when he first approached Michael, when they heard the gunshot followed by the suspect making a racial slur, muttering something about white privilege. The knife used in the attack was reportedly left at the scene. Van Roy was detained by bystanders and was taken into custody. Michael was taken to the hospital where he later died. Michael was an emergency room physician at Providence Mission Hospital in Laguna Beach, where he had worked since 2011. Van Roy is charged with murder and is held at the Orange County Jail on a $1 million bond. If convicted, he could face up to 26 years to life in prison. Further charges are possible. William Frederick Burrows is behind bars after allegedly stabbing a woman to death and hurting 2 other people in a domestic violence incident on Tuesday night at a home in Keystone Heights, Florida. At around 8:35 p.m. on the 31st of January, deputies responded to the 6300 block of Auburn Avenue after a female victim called 911 to report that her boyfriend William was attacking her. When deputies arrived at the home, they found 3 people suffering injuries. The victims included a woman with multiple stab wounds to her body, a male victim with a stab wound to his back, and William's girlfriend, whom deputies say he assaulted. The man and woman who were stabbed were rushed to the hospital for treatment, where the woman later died. Deputies said that William attacked his girlfriend in the home when the man and woman attempted to intervene to protect her, and both were stabbed. The victims' names have not been publicly released. William is charged with murder, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, and domestic battery. He's held at the Clay County Jail where his bond amount is yet to be set. He's scheduled to make his first court appearance on Saturday the 4th of February. 62-year-old David Kashish is behind bars for allegedly fatally shooting his girlfriend during an argument on Thursday night. At around 9:06 p.m. on the 2nd of February, authorities responded to the 800 block of Marble Avenue in Sandy Valley, Nevada, on a report that a woman had been shot inside a residence. When officers arrived, they located the victim suffering from a gunshot wound. Medics transported her to a local hospital, where she later died. Homicide detectives' investigation indicates that the woman was involved in a dispute with her boyfriend David, and during the argument David shot her. He was arrested at the scene and booked into jail for murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and possession of a gun by a prohibited person. The woman has not been publicly identified. Authorities in Chicago, Illinois are investigating the fatal shooting of a 21-year-old man early this week. At around 1:25 p.m. on Wednesday the 1st of February, DeMonte Glover was standing outside on the street at 1943 West Garfield Boulevard, just a couple of doors down from Skip's Food and Liquor store, when an unknown suspect approached him and shot him in the stomach. He was taken to the University of Chicago Medical Center in a critical condition and died from his injuries a short time later. Chicago police have not released the names of any suspects or a possible motive in the shooting. Detectives continue to investigate the matter. Authorities are investigating the shooting death of a 15-year-old boy in South Toledo, Ohio on Friday afternoon. At 3:33 p.m. on the 3rd of February, Toledo police were called to a home at 546 Shasta Drive on report of a person shot. When officers arrived at the property, they entered the premises and found Donald Hogan, who had been shot at least once. Emergency crews rushed Donald to the University of Toledo Medical Center, where he later died. Investigators have ruled his death a homicide. Authorities have no suspects to date and have not revealed a possible motive in the shooting. Anyone with information on the case is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. 43-year-old Justin Torrance Sr. of Forest Park, Ohio, is behind bars after allegedly stabbing another man to death. The incident occurred at around 3:20 p.m. on Friday the 3rd of February, when authorities were dispatched to 828 Cascade Road on a report of a person injured in an assault. When officers arrived on scene, they found 44-year-old Stephen Lambert lying in the driveway in a critical condition, suffering from multiple stab wounds. He was transported to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, where he later died. Witnesses told police that Justin intentionally killed Stephen after stabbing him multiple times following a verbal altercation. Justin then fled the scene in a car, but he was apprehended later that day. Justin is charged with murder and is held at the Hamilton County Justice Center on a $750,000 bond. The Travis County Sheriff's Office has identified a man who was shot and killed at an apartment complex early Thursday morning in North Austin, Texas. At 12:56 a.m. on the 2nd of February, authorities responded to the Ridgecrest apartment complex, located at 3101 Wells Branch Parkway, on report of shots fired. When deputies arrived at the scene, they found 26-year-old Rashad Anthony Walker dead from multiple gunshot wounds outside his apartment. Detectives worked the scene throughout the night, and their investigation indicates that Rashad was targeted. No further information has been provided at this stage. The case remains ongoing. Cincinnati, Ohio police found 3 people dead after murder-suicide in their Avondale home on Friday morning. At around 5:30 a.m. on the 3rd of February, police entered a home at 3657 Canyon Road to complete a welfare check. When they arrived, they found a woman and her 2 sons dead from gunshot wounds. Police have identified the deceased as 38-year-old Darlene Flores and her 2 sons, 19-year-old Eric Johnson Jr. and 16-year-old Rodrigo Johnson. Authorities said that Eric killed his mother and his younger brother before turning the gun on himself. At 5 a.m., 30 minutes before the bodies were discovered by police, Eric allegedly sent his friends text messages saying that he loved them and that he's sorry and that he misses his sister. Friends said Eric was struggling with the loss of his 6-year-old sister Alia Johnson, who was also killed in a murder-suicide at the hands of their father Eric Johnson Sr. in August last year. An argument between neighbours has resulted in a fatal shooting in Berlin, New Hampshire on Friday morning. Police have arrested 44-year-old Nomar Ramos Rivera and charged him with second-degree murder. At around 8:15 a.m. on the 3rd of February, officers responded to multiple reports of shots fired outside the residence of 568 Sullivan Street. When they arrived, they found 40-year-old Christopher Veliz outside the building with multiple gunshot wounds and later died at the scene, and his death was ruled a homicide. Police said that Nomar also shot at a nearby car with 2 people inside and is also facing 2 counts of reckless conduct with a deadly weapon. Nomar is held at the Coos County Jail without bail. The bodies of a married couple in Pitt County, North Carolina, have been found inside the Greenville home on Saturday afternoon in what is believed to be a murder-suicide. At 1:14 p.m. on the 4th of February, authorities responded to 1113 Lexington Downs Drive to complete a welfare check. When deputies arrived at the residence, they found 62-year-old William Small and 42-year-old Heather Small dead from gunshot wounds inside. According to the Pitt County Sheriff's Office, the deaths appeared to be a murder-suicide. A weapon was found at the home, and deputies say there was no signs of forced entry into the premises. It's unclear who pulled the trigger. The investigation is ongoing. A 37-year-old Texas man is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting a 44-year-old man during an argument over the weekend. On Saturday, the 4th of February, authorities were dispatched to a residence along County Road 4252 in DeKalb on a report of shots fired. When deputies arrived at the home, they found a man inside in a critical condition with multiple gunshot wounds. Paramedics transported the victim to Christus St. Michael's Hospital in Texarkana, where he later died. The victim was identified as 44-year-old Demond Easter. Investigators said that Demond was at his home when he got into a verbal altercation and was shot and killed by 37-year-old Daryl Alexis Betts. It's unclear how the 2 men knew each other. Daryl Alexis was arrested and charged with murder. He is held at the Bi-State Detention Center, where his bond has not been set. This is not Daryl Alexis's first run-in with the law. He's previously been arrested for offences including drug charges and evading arrest. The investigation into the matter continues. A man has been arrested after he inappropriately touched juveniles at a public swimming pool on Friday morning. At around 6 a.m. on the 3rd of February, deputies from the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office responded to the Claude Moore Park swimming pool in Sterling, Virginia on a report of an assault. 2 juveniles were reportedly touched inappropriately by a man while they were in the pool. It was also reported that same day that 2 juveniles were touched inappropriately by the same man in December as well. 62-year-old Michael Taylor was arrested and charged with 2 counts of assault stemming from the December incident and 2 counts of assault from the February incident. Michael was transported to the Loudoun County Adult Detention Center, where he's been held on no bond. Detectives with the Special Victims Unit believe there may be additional victims. Investigation into the matter continues. A 27-year-old woman is behind bars after allegedly fatally shooting a 32-year-old man during a domestic dispute in Washington, D.C. over the weekend. At 5:04 a.m. on Saturday, the 4th of February, authorities responded to an apartment in the 1100 block of 21st Place Northeast on reports of a shooting. When officers arrived, they found a man inside the residence who was unresponsive with gunshot wounds. He was identified as Gregory Wilkins. Fire emergency medical services responded to the scene, but they were unable to save him. The suspect, Diamond Stevenson was arrested and is charged with second-degree murder while armed. The detective's investigation revealed this offence was domestic in nature. A 34-year-old Houston, Texas man has been charged with murder in connection to a woman found dead in a newly built home that she was contracted to clean. At just before 5 p.m. on the 31st of January, 57-year-old Maria Rios of Rocheron was found dead inside a vacant home at a construction site at 1303 Green J Lane in Lamarck by the property manager of the new Sunset Grove subdivision. Authorities responded to the bloody scene and said that Maria's injuries indicated that she was a victim of an assault, and her death was definitely a homicide. Investigators identify Carlos Balcazer as a suspect after linking him to evidence thrown away in a dumpster along Gulf Crest Boulevard, about 7 minutes from his residence on Broadway Street, although they have not disclosed what that evidence is. Investigators said that Maria and Carlos knew each other, but did not disclose how, and that this was a targeted attack. On the morning of the 2nd of February, Carlos was arrested at his apartment. After being treated for injuries he received during his arrest, he was taken to the Galveston County Jail. He is charged with murder and tampering with evidence. Bond was set at $290,000, but since Carlos is on an immigration hold, this has been denied. Maria was a mother of 3 daughters and a grandmother of 4 grandchildren. Maria's daughters have no idea why someone would want to hurt their mother. They described her as a hard worker and an amazing woman who was full of life. The investigation into the matter continues. A 29-year-old man is behind bars after allegedly fatally shooting a 31-year-old woman in a hotel room in Amarillo, Texas over the weekend. At around 7:30 a.m. on Sunday the 5th of February, authorities responded to the Wood Spring Suites, located at 4601 East Interstate 40, on reports of a possible homicide. When officers arrived, they found Kendra Vella dead inside a room with multiple gunshot wounds. Investigators identified the suspect as 29-year-old Trey Philip Greenleaf. They tracked him down that night to the Baymont Inn and Suites Hotel at 1700 East Interstate 40. The SWAT team took Trey into custody at 7:40 p.m. He is charged with murder and is currently being held at the Potter County Detention Center. The motive in the attack is unclear, as the investigation into the matter continues. A 19-year-old woman was killed, and 4 others were injured in a shooting during a Fredo Bang rap concert early Sunday morning. The shooting occurred at around 2:30 a.m. on the 5th of February, outside the Old Branch building at 430 Clay Street in Newport, Arkansas, while the rapper was on stage indoors. The deceased woman has been identified as Tamariana Jarrett of Augusta, while one of the 4 injured was airlifted to hospital. Roderick Spearman, who was working security at the event, said that he and others tried to get people inside once the shooting started. "I know there was no weapons inside the building or anything like that. We had 10 security guards, and we also had an off-duty sheriff," he said. "They controlled everything." Newport Lieutenant Mark Hammond said that 2 people were being held for probable cause and are expected to be charged. 28-year-old Aaron Warren and 31-year-old Richard McGee are being held at the Jackson County Jail, and that further arrests are expected. "We want to point out that these 2 individuals are not Newport residents. There were people that came in," he said. Mark said that he didn't have a specific number, but a large crowd was attending the concert. The investigation is ongoing. A 31-year-old Mobile, Alabama woman is behind bars for allegedly hitting her ex-boyfriend with a car. On the 1st of February, Bobby Black used a vehicle to intentionally strike her ex-boyfriend in the 1000 block of Seal Street near Highway 45, breaking his legs and feet from the collision. The victim reported the matter to the police on the 6th of February. On the 8th of February, Bobby was arrested for attempted murder. She's held at the Mobile jail without bond. The motive of the attack is unclear, as the investigation into the matter continues. 72-year-old Patricia Ricks of Nashville, North Carolina, is behind bars after being accused of fatally beating her 8-year-old granddaughter. And just after 4 p.m. on Tuesday the 7th of February, authorities were alerted about a child who had been brought to the emergency room at Nashville UNC Healthcare. The girl had severe injuries throughout her entire body and head and was deceased upon arrival. Upon further investigation, the Nash County Sheriff's Office said the victim and several other siblings all lived together with Patricia, their legal guardian, in the 5000 block of Dutchman Road. Some of the children were home while the 8-year-old was beaten. One of the children at the home called 911 that day, telling the call centre that Patricia was driving the girl to the hospital. The victim's siblings are in the custody of the Department of Social Services. Detectives said the motive in the killing remains unknown, and they expect to learn more details when an autopsy report is completed. Investigators said they did find weapons at the house, but they did not elaborate on what type of weapons or if they were ever used on the children. The victim's identity has not been released at this time. Patricia was transported to the sheriff's office, where she made no statement. Patricia is charged with murder and abuse with serious injury. She is held at the Nash County Detention Center without bond. 19-year-old Samuel Kalinsky of Rolla, Missouri is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting his father early this week. At 8:51 a.m. on Monday the 6th of February, authorities responded to a 911 call and a report of a shooting at a residence on the 12,000 block of County Road 2220. The person who contacted police said that Samuel had shot his father multiple times with a .22 caliber pistol. When deputies arrived at the home, they found 64-year-old Ralph Kalinsky dead from multiple gunshot wounds to his head and chest. Samuel told investigators that he shot his father in self-defense. Multiple other shots were fired into a wall and door inside a bedroom. Samuel was arrested and charged with murder and armed criminal action. He is held at the Phelps County Jail without bond. 29-year-old Ashley Diaz from Homestead, Florida is behind bars after police say she tried to suffocate her 1-year-old daughter. On Tuesday the 7th of February, officers responded to Ashley and her boyfriend's residence along Flagler Avenue on report of Ashley putting a pillow over their baby's face, but determined it was a domestic dispute and found no evidence at the time to the allegations. When police continued to investigate, they learnt there was footage of Ashley from a FaceTime video with the baby's father where she threatens to kill the baby. The recording shows Ashley putting a large black pillow over the baby's face and head. Ashley is seen pressing down on the pillow with enough pressure that the tips of her fingers appear to lose blood flow and turn white. The video also shows the baby when Ashley is doing this, flailing her arms and legs, possibly due to her not being able to breathe. The baby's father said Ashley became enraged when she thought he was with another woman. Ashley's boyfriend told police that she heard a lady in the background while they were on the phone, and then, suspicious he was with another woman, FaceTimed her boyfriend. Ashley demanded her boyfriend show her different areas of the property where he was working to make sure there was no women there, and was screaming at him and telling him if he did not continue to show her the entire area around him, she was going to kill their daughter. Authorities said that Ashley then began to push and kick the baby. Ashley later told investigators that she was just playing with the baby, and they always played that way. Ashley said that she told her boyfriend that she'll kill their daughter just to upset him, but that she would never do anything to harm their child. Ashley was arrested on an attempted murder charge, and she's been held at the Turnford Guilford Night Correctional Centre without bond. Police said the baby is currently in good health. "34-year-old single Shanice Davis is behind bars after authorities discovered the body of her infant son hidden inside her home. At around 11:30 a.m. on Wednesday the 8th of February, authorities responded to a call at a residence at 107 Franklin Street in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, regarding the well-being of a small child. When officers arrived at the property, they conducted a search of the home and found a 3-month-old boy dead, wrapped in a blanket and placed in a suitcase, which was inside a closet. The boy had been reportedly left in the suitcase for at least 12 hours. Police Chief Bobby Martin said he's struggling to make sense of it all. "I'm a grandfather. I have a very young granddaughter, and when you respond to something like this, you often question why and how this has happened," he said. According to Roanoke Rapids Police, the cause of death is unknown. Sinkle's been charged with felony concealment of death of a child. Bobby said that the mother knew the child was dead and did not try to call for assistance of the child. He said they have not charged the mother with murder. "We're going on the evidence we have at hand," he said. "Any evidence that will be recovered on the autopsy of the child would help us make further decisions. Eventually the other charges could be filed, such as homicide," he said. Sinkle's been held at the Halifax County Jail on a $15,000 bond. A 47-year-old man is behind bars after allegedly beating his 82-year-old mother to death with a table leg. At 11:43 p.m. on Monday the 6th of February, Authorities received a 911 call regarding an unresponsive woman found inside a residence located at 2413 Wade Hampton Boulevard at the Hickory Ridge Apartments in Greenville, South Carolina. When officers arrived, they found a woman identified as Frances Quick dead inside. Investigators identified the victim's son, Bobby Quick, as a suspect. He had reportedly been living with his mother for about a week before she was found dead. Authorities said that Bobby killed his mother by striking her multiple times with a table leg, sometime between Friday the 3rd of February and Monday the 6th of February. At 5:45 a.m. on the 7th of February, Bobby was tracked down to Asheville, North Carolina, where he was arrested and charged with murder. He was booked into the Buncombe County Detention Center as a fugitive, and is awaiting extradition back to South Carolina. The motive in the fatal beating is unclear, as the investigation into the matter continues. Police have arrested an Elizabethtown, Kentucky woman who's accused of hitting a 2-year-old child multiple times at a grocery store earlier this week. 22-year-old Danielle Bryant was charged with criminal abuse of a child. On the night of Monday the 6th of February, officers received a call to the Kroger at 111 Town Drive on a report of a woman who hit a juvenile inside the store. Police obtained video surveillance of Danielle at the self-checkout line, where the girl had fallen out of her shopping cart. Danielle picked the girl up, who was crying, and hit her with her left hand and started pulling her hair. Another witness told police that Danielle swore at the child before hitting her. She saw Danielle take the child to her car and placed her into a car seat. During this time, the child continued to cry, which caused the mother to open the car door and strike the child with her hand. The witness told police that Danielle hit the child 3 to 5 times. Police interviewed Danielle, who admitted to hitting the child because she was overstimulated by the child's crying. Danielle also told police that she placed the child in the car seat because the child bit her. She said she lost it and confessed to hitting the child. Police said that the child's face was red and swollen on the left side. Danielle was arrested early the following morning. She's held at the Hardin County Jail on a $25,000 bond. "42-year-old Paul Anthony Vasquez is behind bars after being accused of fatally shooting his estranged wife, 44-year-old Rebecca Letson. At 1:43 a.m. on Thursday the 9th of February, deputies responded to a home on the 1200 block of Farm to Market 1554 in Alice, Texas, after a 10-year-old girl called 911 for help. When deputies entered the premises, they found Rebecca unresponsive with a gunshot wound. The girl told deputies that her father shot and killed her mother with a shotgun. Paul had fled the scene in his vehicle, but the weapon was recovered. Later that day, Paul was arrested following a traffic stop at the intersection of North Cameron Street and East Main Street for reckless driving and driving under the influence. He was taken to the Jim Wells County Jail. Paul was then served with a murder warrant, and he immediately requested an attorney. His bond is set at $1 million. It's unclear what led to the shooting, but authorities said that Paul had a history of violence. The girl was with Protective Services before she was placed into the care of other family members. The investigation into the matter continues. A mother is wanted by authorities for allegedly abandoning her 2 young children and leaving them with barely any food for 6 weeks. 31-year-old Raven Yates allegedly left her 12-year-old daughter and 3-year-old son alone in their home in the 2000 block of Maplewood Ridge Drive in Raymond Forest, Texas. She reportedly abandoned them on the 28th of September until they were discovered living in deplorable conditions on the 14th of November. Police Chief Stephen Carlisle said there was no food in the house. Everything was empty. There were some dry beans and spices, but that was it. Investigators said the fridge and cabinets were nearly empty, and the toddler's room reeked of urine. A 12-year-old cannot take care of a 3-year-old for a long period of time, especially over a month and a half, Stephen said. It's dangerous and irresponsible of a parent. Without medical supplies and ways to get food, that's very dangerous. Authorities said that the children have different fathers, and Raven allegedly threatened her elder child that the girl's father would take her and leave her 3-year-old brother alone if she told anyone. Afraid of her mother, the daughter would call her father to get him to order food for the house by telling him that her mother was working. Family members later spotted Raven in Mobile, Alabama without children and contacted the child's father. Stephen said that the 12-year-old's father, who lives in California, flew to Texas and called police when he learned of the children's living conditions. He added that the children had never been enrolled in school for the entire year they lived in Texas. Raven has been charged with 2 counts of abandoning or endangering a child without intent to return. The Raymond Forest Police Department is working with police in Alabama to find and arrest the mother. Despite a warrant being out for her arrest since the 6th of December, Raven continues to post actively on social media to thousands of her followers. Raven is also a mother to a 14-year-old daughter, who was reported as a runaway before Raven allegedly left her other children. All 3 children have been reunited and are safe and living with a family member, authorities said. On the 9th of February, 60-year-old Anthony Nicholas Argo was sentenced to life in prison for murdering his wife, 55-year-old Linda Schuler Argo, in 2019. At 9:18 p.m. on the 14th of June 2019, Linda's daughter called 911 to request a welfare check on her mother, who lived with Anthony at Westbury Mews apartment complex along Old Trolley Road in Somerville, South Carolina. When officers arrived outside the premises, they could see the victim's motionless body propped up against a couch through the window. They forced entry into the home and found Linda had multiple stab wounds and a 19-inch butcher knife embedded in the right side of her neck. An autopsy report revealed the victim suffered at least 14 stab wounds on her arms, chest, stomach and face before the final fatal blow. Anthony was seen by a witness unconscious in the apartment complex driveway, and he was transported to the hospital with a blood alcohol level of 0.156. Linda's blood was found splattered all over Anthony's jean shorts and a pair of flip-flops that he was wearing. Investigators said that in the weeks leading up to Linda's murder, Anthony stopped going to work before eventually quitting, and he often spent his days drinking at home and buying lottery tickets. Text messages revealed that Linda was concerned about Anthony wasting his money on alcohol, and he was not paying the rent. They were eventually evicted, and Linda was planning to leave Anthony and move in with her daughter the day after the fatal stabbing. Linda's car was filled with her belongings parked outside the apartment complex where she was killed. A neighbour reportedly heard the couple arguing, and Linda was allegedly the victim of domestic abuse. Years after his arrest, Anthony told a witness who testified at trial that he was sick of his wife nagging him and she would never shut up, so he shut her up for good. 45-year-old Aaron Bruce Halley is behind bars after allegedly stealing an SUV in Coos Bay, Oregon, and speeding away from police. At 6:31 a.m. on the 6th of February, authorities responded to an alarm call at the Green Bay area Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram dealership at 1400 Ocean Boulevard Northwest. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Aaron inside the business attempting to steal a vehicle. Moments later, they saw him in a white 2022 Jeep Grand Wagoneer reversing through the closed bay doors. CCTV cameras captured the Jeep smashing through the door and driving away with a large piece of wood from the door still attached to the front of the car. Officers initiated chase, but later discontinued the pursuit due to public safety concerns. At around 6 p.m. that evening, a citizen had sent a press release of the theft on Facebook, spotted the stolen vehicle in the parking lot of Walmart in Newport, Oregon, roughly 100 miles away. Authorities responded to the scene and located the stolen vehicle as well as Aaron. Aaron was arrested and charged with burglary, criminal mischief, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, attempted to elude in a vehicle, and reckless driving. He was transported to the Coos County Jail where he remains held. A 26-year-old woman is behind bars after allegedly shooting another woman in the chest in Sapulpa, Oklahoma. At 5:44 p.m. on Sunday the 5th of February, authorities responded to the 1400 block of East Hill Avenue in the Bridge Creek apartment complex on a report a person had been shot. When officers arrived, they located a female victim with a gunshot wound to her upper chest. The victim was able to speak to officers to tell them what happened. After speaking with the victim and witnesses on scene, officers identified the suspect as Morgan Rourke. It was determined that the victim and Morgan had been in an argument when Morgan produced a handgun and shot the victim. Morgan was arrested at the scene for shooting with intent to kill and was later booked into the Creek County Jail. The victim, whose name remains anonymous, was admitted to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Police in Taylor, Michigan are investigating murder-suicide after a 21-year-old man and his 23-year-old girlfriend were found dead on Monday night. At just after 8 p.m. on the 6th of February, authorities responded to a home at 22038 Wick Road to complete a welfare check. When officers arrived at the residence, they were met by the homeowner. Once inside, they found 2 bodies with gunshot wounds. Taylor Police Chief John Blair said it was a terrible scene inside. Unfortunately, there were 2 deceased on the floor directly inside the door, and that began our investigation, he said. The man was identified as Nate Jackson, and his girlfriend as Amber Bradshaw. Amber's sister, Shauna Killian, said that Amber wanted to break up with Nate after a year of dating. She was going over there to break up with him, and I believe that she asked everyone to leave the home, and it sounded like it was quite the argument, she said. The big argument inside of Nate's house then turned to gunshots with an AR-style rifle. That's not typical of these domestic situations, John said. Nate panicked and then called his father to admit to the shooting. He said he harmed his girlfriend, and there was no reason for him to be alive, and then heard what was believed to be a gunshot, John said. Nate's father called the police, and the Taylor Police Department eventually went to the house for the search. Although the police said that Nate doesn't have a criminal record, Shauna said the family was a little skeptical of him. He didn't feel right to me whatsoever, and I didn't feel comfortable having him in my home, she said. Amber was a mother to a 5-year-old boy who was elsewhere at the time. 34-year-old Tamika Triplett is behind bars after she allegedly showed up to school to fight her son and chase kids with a knife. On Thursday the 9th of February, police were called to the Booker T. Washington High School in South Memphis, Tennessee, after Tamika allegedly parked in the school's lot and ran towards students with a knife. A school official then pepper sprayed Tamika and her son to stop them from fighting. Tamika was arrested and charged with carrying a weapon on a school property and tampering with evidence. She's held at the Shelby County Jail on a $50,000 bond. Her son received a juvenile summons and is now in his aunt's custody. A man is behind bars after allegedly fatally shooting another man in Amory, Mississippi Tuesday evening. At around 6:30 p.m. on the 7th of February, authorities responded to the intersection of J Avenue and 111th Street on reports of shots fired. When officers arrived, they found a man with gunshot wounds, with no suspect in sight. Medics transported him to the local hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival at 6:51 p.m. The Monroe County coroner identified the victim as 34-year-old Dennis Izell. Investigators received multiple tips from witnesses and identified 40-year-old Jermaine McIntosh as the suspect. Law enforcement began searching for Jermaine, and he soon turned himself in without incident, and the weapon was recovered. Police Chief Ronnie Bowen said that the victim and the suspect met at the intersection near Jermaine's home when multiple shots were fired, and the victim was hit at least once. Ronnie said that there had been an ongoing dispute between Jermaine and the family of the victim. He said that the shooting was not a drive-by or a chance encounter. Jermaine is charged with murder and is held at the Monroe County Detention Center on a $300,000 bond. The investigation into the matter continues. A woman and a teenager have been arrested a week after a fatal shooting of 35-year-old London Rupert in Macon, Mississippi. 20-year-old Yambashay Bush and a 17-year-old boy are both charged with murder. Authorities have not released the teen's name because of his age. On the night of the 3rd of February, London was driving an SUV along Martin Luther King Jr. Drive when he was shot in the head. Police said the gunfire came from the side of the street and not inside the vehicle. London was transported to the Jackson Hospital in a critical condition, where he later died. Yambashay and the unidentified teen remain in jail without bond. The motive behind the attack is unclear, as the investigation into the matter continues. On Thursday the 9th of February, 42-year-old Brian Welcome was arrested for fatally shooting 41-year-old Eric Dougherty. The shooting occurred at just after 3 a.m. on the 28th of November, when authorities responded to a home at 20867 Walnut Street in Denali, Florida on reported homicide. When deputies arrived at the premises, they found Eric dead in a living room. Investigators identified Brian as the suspect, but he fled the scene before deputies arrived. Witnesses said that Brian went to the home to hang out with a friend, where there were multiple people inside, and that Brian was reportedly under the influence of drugs. Brian was sitting at the table in the home's living room when Eric was sleeping on a couch nearby. Then, in an act described by one witness as cold-blooded, Brian suddenly stood up without provocation and shot Eric twice, once in the leg and another in the stomach, fatally wounding him. A witness told investigators that he thought about taking the gun from Brian, but he was concerned for his life. He said he willingly drove Brian away from the house after the shooting because he was scared he would shoot him too. The Marin County Sheriff's Office said that Brian had 21 prior felony convictions. Brian is charged with murder and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. He is held at the Marin County Jail without bond. A man was killed in Macon, Georgia over the weekend when multiple bullets pierced his home. At 5:47 a.m. on Saturday the 11th of February, Bibb County deputies responded to a residence in the 2400 block of Monroe Avenue to complete a welfare check after receiving a report of shots fired. They noticed bullet damage to the exterior of the home and entered the residence to check on anyone inside. Inside, deputies found 39-year-old Jimmy Lee Bradbury Jr. unresponsive from multiple gunshot wounds, and he was later pronounced dead at the scene by the county coroner. Investigators are working to determine what led to the shooting. Anyone with information in the case is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. A Florida man is behind bars for allegedly assaulting a couple before killing a female hotel worker in Paducah, Kentucky over the weekend. 55-year-old Robert Pennell is charged with murder, assault, wanton endangerment, disorderly conduct, menacing, and resisting arrest. At 9:48 a.m. on Saturday the 11th of February, authorities responded to the Best Western Hotel at 2960 Husband Road, near Exit 11 on report of an active shooter. When officers arrived, they located Robert, who was identified as a suspect outside of the hotel, and detained him in the parking lot. Deputies began searching the hotel and located a female employee on the first floor, with multiple gunshot wounds to head and body. Detectives learned through the investigation that Robert reportedly assaulted a couple in the parking lot after they couldn't give him a cigarette lighter. He then entered the hotel with a handgun and walked down the hallway and opened fire indiscriminately, critically injuring the employee. Several other people were nearby when shots were fired, but no one else was struck by gunfire. Police recovered the handgun, which Robert threw inside the lobby of the hotel after the shooting. The shooting victim, whose name remains anonymous, was transported to hospital but died around 4 p.m. Her doctors deemed her injuries too severe for organ donation. Robert's from Palm Coast, Florida, and was staying at the hotel at the time of the shooting. It's unclear what Robert was doing in Paducah or the motive behind his actions. Robert's been held in the McCracken County Jail on a combined bond of $2.5 million. The investigation into the matter continues. Authorities are investigating a murder-suicide at an apartment complex in Tuscaloosa, Alabama over the weekend. At 2:15 a.m. on Sunday the 12th of February, police responded to the Winding Creek Apartments along 6802 Old Greensboro Road on report of a domestic disturbance. Authorities said that several people witnessed a married couple engaged in some type of domestic altercation, both inside and outside of their apartment. When officers entered the scene, they found the couple inside their apartment dead from gunshot wounds. During the investigation, it was determined that the husband fatally shot his wife before killing himself. The couples identified as 24-year-old Devon Walker and 24-year-old Bernice Walker. According to their Facebook page, they married in April of 2021. The Tuscaloosa police said that this is a tragic example of domestic violence. We ask for the privacy of the victim's family at this time. 25-year-old Marquez Charles Wright Jr. is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting 14-year-old Jacob Ross inside a McDonald's restaurant in Sumter, South Carolina over the weekend. At around 3:45 p.m. on Sunday the 12th of February, authorities responded to reports of a disturbance inside the fast food store at 101 North Lafayette Drive. Marquez allegedly got into an altercation with two McDonald's staff. A family member who was there to pick up another man from work tried to break up the fight, when Marquez reportedly pulled out a gun and started shooting before running away. Jacob, another family member who was present, was shot and died at the scene. No one else suffered any injuries. Police later tracked Marquez down and he was arrested without incident. He's held at the Sumter County Jail and he's been charged with murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, and unlawful carrying of a pistol. A suspect is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting a man in Thomaston, Georgia on Saturday afternoon. At 1:56 p.m. on the 16th of February, authorities responded to Avenue G, near G Circle, and reports of shots fired. When officers arrived, they found a man in a critical condition with 2 gunshot wounds. The victim, later identified as 21-year-old Delonzo Allen, was taken to the hospital where he later succumbed to his injuries. During a homicide investigation of the incident, police identified Samuel Sims Jr. as the suspect, and he was taken in for questioning. He was charged with malice murder and criminal street gang activity, and he's held at the Upson County Jail. Authorities said that additional charges are possible pending further investigation. Authorities are investigating a murder-suicide in Greensboro, North Carolina that happened on Saturday morning. At 5:47 a.m. on the 18th of February, authorities responded to the 900 block of Alanthus Street after receiving a report of an aggravated assault. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a couple inside a car dead from gunshot wounds. Police said that 31-year-old Tevin Jolley fatally shot his girlfriend, 34-year-old Ravat Robinson, before turning the gun on himself. Ravat was killed 2 days after her 34th birthday. She's survived by her 7 children. The investigation is active and ongoing. No further information is available at this time. 33-year-old Brendan Posty is behind bars and is accused of killing his 25-year-old sister Cassidy Snow in Ventura County early Friday morning. At 1:12 a.m. on the 17th of February, authorities responded to a home at 112 Sandra Court in Newbury Park, California, on a report of an assault with a deadly weapon. When deputies arrived, they found Cassidy unresponsive with a gunshot wound inside the residence and was declared dead at the scene. Deputies spoke with Brendan and other family members who lived at the house and were told that Brendan had shot his sister. Authorities said that Brendan was a US combat veteran who may have been dealing with mental health issues at the time. He was taken into custody without incident. A search warrant was executed at the home and a firearm was recovered. Neighbours said that they were shocked to learn of the shooting as the siblings appeared to be close. Brendan is charged with murder and he's held at the Ventura County Jail on a $2 million bail. The motive in the shooting is unclear as the investigation into the matter continues. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation is looking at a case after deputies shot a man who allegedly fatally shot his wife in Covington, Georgia Sunday night. At 6:22 p.m. on the 19th of February, authorities were called to a home at 97 Livingston Lane on a report of a stolen vehicle. When deputies arrived at the property, they were met by 57-year-old Joe Hobson standing in the driveway holding a gun. During the incident, Joe said that he shot his wife. Deputies told Joe to drop his gun several times, but after he refused to comply, they shot him. Deputies then searched the house and found his wife, 49-year-old Alina Hobson, laying on the ground in the yard on the side of the house. Joe and his wife were taken to the hospital for treatment. However, Alina was pronounced dead on arrival, while Joe remains in a critical condition. No officers were injured during the ordeal. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation will conduct an independent investigation of the officer-involved shooting and the homicide. Charges against Joe are pending. Once completed, the case will be turned over to the Newton County District Attorney's Office for review. Clayton County Police are searching for the suspect responsible for the fatal shooting of a woman in Jonesboro, Georgia on Sunday night. At 10:22 p.m. on the 19th of February, authorities responded to the 8300 block of Kendrick Road on reports of a person shot. When officers arrived at the scene, they discovered the victim, identified as 34-year-old Aisha Reed, inside a vehicle with multiple gunshot wounds. She was rushed to a local hospital in a critical condition, but died shortly thereafter. Authorities said that Aisha had engaged in a verbal argument with 32-year-old Hashim Michello Jordan when it escalated to gunfire. Police said that the suspect fled the location prior to the officers arriving at the scene. Hashim is wanted by police. He's accused of malice murder and possession of a weapon during a commission of a crime. Anyone who knows of Hashim's whereabouts is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. The investigation into the matter continues. A Pennsylvania woman is behind bars and is accused of fatally shooting her boyfriend over the weekend in the Cranberry Township home. At 12:10 a.m. on Sunday the 12th of February, authorities responded to a home at 570 Brandywine Drive on reports of a domestic disturbance. A woman, identified as 26-year-old Amanda Hughes, called 911 and told emergency dispatchers that she fired a weapon and then ran from her home to a neighbour's place. When officers arrived at the scene, investigators said that Amanda told an officer that she shot her boyfriend. Police found 30-year-old Anthony Smith upstairs in the townhouse in a critical condition, with multiple gunshot wounds to his chest. No one else was inside the home. First responders began performing medical aid, and Anthony was flown by hospital to the Allegheny General Hospital, where he later died at 1:49 a.m. Amanda said that there was a physical altercation between her and Anthony. She said that Anthony punched her several times in the head and face, causing her to fall. She said that she then grabbed a gun from her purse and shot him several times. Police said that Amanda had a small cut and swelling on her cheek. Her hand was also bruised. She was taken into custody. The gun used in the shooting was found in the driveway of the neighbour's property. Police said that the gun used was registered to Amanda. Neighbours said Amanda lived in the townhouse for less than a year. Amanda is charged with criminal homicide. She's held at the Butler County Prison without the possibility of bail. A 57-year-old business owner from Key West, Florida, allegedly fatally shot a 21-year-old man who urinated on the side of his building. At 12:28 a.m. on Monday the 13th of February, officers responded to a shooting in the parking lot behind the Kongtown Liquor and Lounge, located at 3340 North Roosevelt Boulevard, and found the victim Garrett Hughes lying on the ground suffering from a gunshot wound. First responders attempted life-saving measures, and he was transported to the Lower Keys Medical Center, where he died from his injuries a short time later. The suspect, Lloyd Brewer, was still at the scene and was immediately detained. Officers also found a firearm believed to have been used in the shooting nearby. Video surveillance shows Garrett shirtless, unarmed and drunk when he urinated on Lloyd's building, which contains a bar, and other tenants when Lloyd confronted him while also drunk. Garrett is seen stumbling around, and Lloyd pulls up his shirt, pulls out a gun, and shoots him once in the stomach. He then fires another shot that misses him. Authorities said that Garrett was at the bar with several friends. He immediately rushed to his side after he was shot. He told them he was having trouble breathing. Lloyd then called 911 and allegedly said he shot the victim in self-defense. Lloyd is charged with murder and one count of committing a first-degree felony with a weapon. He's held at the Monroe County Jail without bond. A 28-year-old man was allegedly pistol-whipped and held hostage after a woman found out he had sex with her 15-year-old daughter. At around 2:30 p.m. on Monday the 13th of February, police were called to a home along East Chalmers Avenue in Youngstown, Ohio, after receiving a call about a man being held at gunpoint. When officers arrived at the premises, they found Lorenzo Walker and a woman on the porch. Lorenzo was bleeding from the head, and the woman was holding a gun that was jammed. Authorities said that Lorenzo told the woman that he had sex with her 15-year-old daughter, and she pistol-whipped him. Lorenzo told investigators, "I knew what I was getting into. I'm not mad. I'm getting what I deserve." The woman's daughter confirmed Lorenzo's story. Lorenzo told police he has a fiancée, 3 children and a baby on the way. Officers also found crack cocaine on his person. Lorenzo is charged with unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, illegal conveyance of weapons, and drug possession. He's held at Mahoning County Jail. Police took the woman's loaded handgun and said they'll hand it back to her when she has a clear head. A Pierce City, Missouri man is accused of exposing himself to a school bus full of children. 61-year-old James Anderson was arrested on the morning of the 10th of February and is held at the Lawrence County Jail with no bond. He's charged with 3 counts of sexual misconduct involving a child under the age of 15. Last week, 2 students told a Lawrence County deputy that James exposed himself as their school bus passed by his residence. The kids said it happened several days in a row. That report prompted a Lawrence County deputy to ride on the school bus, and he said he also witnessed James pulling down his pants and touching himself when the school bus passed by his home. This isn't the first time James has been accused of exposing himself. He's facing 2 additional charges in Lawrence County for sexual misconduct after several women accused him of exposing himself in Dollar General last July. A court date on the most recent charges has not yet been set. James was out on bond for the first set of charges when the school bus incidents were reported, and was reportedly wearing an ankle monitor at the time. He's expected back in court on the 2nd of March for the charges from 2022. On the 13th of February, 43-year-old Roxanne Page Bocanegra of Cheyenne, Wyoming, was arrested and charged with murdering 58-year-old Jess Smith. At 5:26 a.m. on the 8th of August 2022, deputies from the Laramie County Sheriff's Office were called to Jess's home in the 700 block of Mitchell Court on reports of a domestic violence incident. When they arrived at the premises, they found Jess suffering from a stab wound. He was taken to the Cheyenne Regional Medical Center, where he was later pronounced dead. Roxanne was originally charged for murder on the 10th of August 2022, but was released from jail several days later after former Laramie County District Attorney Lee Manlove declined to charge her, saying there was insufficient evidence to prove Roxanne was not acting in self-defense at the time. The investigation into the matter continues. 3 people been killed and 5 others injured when 43-year-old Anthony McRae opened fire on the Michigan State University campus in East Lansing at 8:18 p.m. on Monday the 13th of February before turning the gun on himself. The deceased victims have been identified as 20-year-old Alexandria Verner, 20-year-old Brian Fraser, and 19-year-old Ariel Diamond Anderson. The 5 that were injured in the shooting remained hospitalized as of Tuesday afternoon. The gunman has no known ties to the school, and it remains unclear what the motive for the shooting is or what kind of weapon he used. His father, Michael, described him as a mama's boy who turned evil and mean after his mother, Linda, suddenly passed away 3 years ago. The pair lived together in Anthony's family home that's about 5 miles away from the university campus. Anthony terrorized the campus for nearly 4 hours, running through the streets, brandishing a gun and shooting bullets. Anthony walked into the academic building named Berkey Hall at 8:18 p.m, blasting indiscriminately at occupants, killing 2 students. After police responded to the scene, Anthony had already left the premises on foot, and about 12 minutes later he entered the MSU Union Building, a popular spot for students to eat, drink and study, where he shot and killed another student. A security camera clip showed him wearing a jean jacket, ball cap and red sneakers, wandering nonchalantly along the street after having just shot up 2 separate locations on campus. Just after midnight, a gunman was found dead just north of the murder scenes from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The investigation into the matter continues. A Brandon, Mississippi woman is behind bars and is accused of killing her fiancé earlier this week. At 12:06 a.m. on Wednesday the 15th of February, deputies responded to a home on Audubon Circle on a reported stabbing. When officers arrived, they were met by a woman at the front door who was described as very upset and asked them to save her fiancé. The woman, later identified as 23-year-old Ashley Tanner Shaw, led deputies through the house where they found a man with a stab wound to his chest. Deputies tried to stop the bleeding and perform CPR until medical personnel arrived. Despite the best efforts of the first responders, the victim passed away. Homicide detectives arrived and processed the scene. Based on the circumstances and evidence found, Ashley was taken into custody. 2 small children who were asleep at the home at the time of the incident were taken by Child Protective Services. Ashley is charged with murder and obstruction of justice. She is held at the Rankin County Jail and has been denied bond. Authorities did not immediately release the victim's name or what led to the stabbing. A Jensen Beach, Florida man is behind bars after detectives allegedly found inappropriate photos and videos of children on the man's electronic devices early this week. In the early morning hours of Tuesday the 14th of February, authorities executed a search warrant on the home of 32-year-old Jonathan Dibble. Investigators said that Jonathan, who's a janitor at Jensen Beach High School, was in possession of child porn, including hundreds of disturbing still and video images of children as young as infants. Detectives seized computers and multiple devices from his home and will continue to investigate the data on those devices. The Martin County Sheriff's Office released a statement saying they were working closely with the school district and made them aware of the charges, at which time the district took immediate and appropriate action. Investigators do not believe the children in the images are locally affiliated, and there's no evidence that the photos were captured using hidden cameras at area schools. Jonathan is charged with multiple counts of child porn possession, and he's been held at the Martin County Jail on a $2.5 million bond. A woman is behind bars after a shooting outside an Irmo, South Carolina grocery store left another woman dead. 23-year-old Christina Harrison is accused of fatally shooting 26-year-old Alexandra Boris during a heated argument in the parking lot of Kroger's shopping centre at 7467 St Andrews Road. The incident occurred at just before 4 p.m. on Tuesday the 14th of February. Alexandra had reportedly been shopping with her sister-in-law, niece and nephew, and had just finished packing the groceries away in a car when a dispute erupted between her and Christina. As Alexandra turned her back to Christina to walk away, Christina allegedly shot her. The area was packed with shoppers and traffic at the time. Officers responded to the scene on reports of a woman shot, and they found Alexandria unresponsive with a gunshot wound to the back of her head, and she was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Witnesses were questioned and surveillance footage was reviewed. Investigators said that it appeared the two women did not know each other, and that after the shooting, Christina fled the scene in a white Ford. About an hour later, Christina turned herself in to police. Alexandria's husband Tyrabora said that the shooting occurred in front of their 2-year-old child and an infant, who were inside the car. He described Alexandria as the best wife he could ever ask for and a great mother. He said he's now left with the burden of raising their son by himself. Alexandria was a cosmetologist and was considering a degree in nursing. Alexandria's death comes after her brother died 6 days earlier from a gunshot wound. Christina is charged with murder, unlawful carrying of a pistol and possession of a firearm during a violent crime. She's held at the Lexington County Detention Center without bond. The investigation into the matter continues. Almost 4 decades after a 13-year-old boy was fatally stabbed in Terra Alta, West Virginia, a man was taken into custody early this week in connection to the killing. On Monday the 13th of February, 56-year-old David Monroe Adams was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Earlier this month, the Preston County Sheriff's Office took a second look at the murder of 13-year-old Jeremiah Jerry Matthew Watkins on the 12th of November 1985. Jerry was found in a shallow hole near railroad tracks with a fatal stab wound to his back. Preston County Captain Chichenell noted in the review of the case that David, who was 18 at the time, made a number of inconsistent statements about the boy's murder. As part of renewing the investigation, law enforcement conducted multiple interviews with David, and he eventually confessed that an argument started over a stolen bike, which resulted in Jerry being taken into a shed and murdered. David was living in Westover, a town about 30 miles northwest of Terra Alta, where the murder took place. He's been held on a $1 million bond and could face additional charges as the investigation continues. A 27-year-old Alabama woman is behind bars after giving birth to a drug-affected baby. On the 26th of January, the Morgan County Department of Human Resources contacted the Priceville Police Department, saying that Beth Monica Schillinger gave birth the day before and that the newborn tested positive for narcotics. On the 15th of February, officers arrested Beth at a Somerville home on outstanding warrants for a failure to appear stemming from a burglary case on the 27th of November, when Beth allegedly cut a lock to someone's shed on a property in Berry Road and stole several items. She's charged with chemical endangerment of a child, unlawful possession of drug paraphernalia, stolen property less than $1,500, failure to appear, and obstruction and probation violation. She's held at the Morgan County Jail in lieu of a $37,800 bond. 32-year-old LaVaughn Barnes is behind bars after a decomposing body was found in his sister's backyard earlier this month. LaVaughn lived in the basement of the property, while his sister and niece lived upstairs. Authorities responded to 1336 Kearney Street Northeast in Washington, D.C., after the suspect reported the discovery of human remains while clearing bamboo from the yard. Authorities arrived and observed the victim's headless and handless body inside a black plastic trash bag, and it appeared that the victim had been shot once in the stomach. Police said that LaVaughn's sister identified the victim as Abdulia Arias Lopez. He was a handyman she'd known for 5 years. She told them that she last hired him in November, but as far as she knew, he never showed up for the job and stopped returning her messages. The medical examiner determined the remains to be human and that the death of the victim was ruled a homicide. Investigators questioned LaVaughn and he allegedly confessed to killing Abdulio. He showed up at the property on the 4th of November to paint the kitchen. LaVaughn said that Abdulio showed him paint and Abdulio put the paint down and turned around to walk away. LaVaughn told police that he became angry for unknown reasons when he tased Abdulio in the back of the head, beat him and stabbed him twice. It's believed that he then shot him in the abdomen. LaVaughn said that after killing Abdulio, he went to Ace Hardware store to purchase an axe to cut up the victim's remains in the basement. He said he then cut off their head and arms and put the body in the trash bag in the backyard. LaVaughn's sister told police that her brother is mentally challenged. LaVaughn was arrested and charged with first-degree murder while armed, and is held without bond. A man is arrested following the fatal shooting of a man in Hazard, Kentucky over the weekend. At 12:15 a.m. on Saturday the 18th of February, authorities responded to a residence at 58 Gamble Drive on reports of shots fired. When officers arrived at the property, They found 29-year-old Ryan Whittaker unresponsive in the driveway in front of the house with multiple gunshot wounds. He was pronounced dead at the scene by the Perry County Coroner's Office. During the investigation, police discovered there had been a verbal altercation between Ryan and 27-year-old Troy Campbell that turned physical, causing shots to be fired. It's unclear what the argument was about. He was taken to the Kentucky River Regional Jail, where he was charged with 1 count of murder. The autopsy and toxicology reports are pending, and the incident remains under investigation. A 22-year-old Fort Pierce, Florida man is behind bars after he allegedly killed his roommate because the roommate threw the suspect's plate full of food on the ground. Brian Marquez was arrested on Sunday the 12th of February. Authorities said they were called to the house at 405 South 18th Street when the homeowner said he saw blood in the backyard and a foot partially exposed from a shallow grave. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a body somewhat buried in an 18-inch deep hole. An autopsy of the body confirmed the person buried was a Hispanic man between the ages of 35 to 45 years old. He had significant facial injuries, broken ribs and a broken nose. Police were led to Brian because he also lived on the property. He rented a small shed just north of the property from the homeowner. Brian was questioned about the body and whether or not he had anything to do with the murder. Authorities said that Brian confessed to the crime, saying he killed his roommate who he only knew as Guanajuato. Brian said the victim threw his plate full of food on the ground and he disrespected him. He didn't do anything immediately, but after having some drinks, he decided to approach Guanajuato. Brian said he started punching him in the ribs, face and nose, which knocked him to the ground. Once Guanajuato was on the ground, Brian said he grabbed dirt and gravel and shoved it into his mouth. When the suspect yelled at the victim to stand up, the victim didn't move, and Brian said that's when he realized Guanajuato was dead. Instead of calling police, Brian said he dragged the body across the yard, dug a shallow grave, and buried the victim and then went to sleep. Authorities said that both the suspect and the victim were illegal immigrants, and that Brian had been in touch with his family trying to arrange a bus back to Mexico. Brian is charged with murder, and he's held at the St. Lucie County Jail on an immigration hold without bond. 50-year-old Derek Lamont Simmons of Arizona is behind bars after he allegedly beat a co-worker to death with a baseball bat in the cafeteria of an Intel building over the weekend. The incident occurred at around 6:15 a.m. on Saturday the 18th of February at a microprocessing manufacturing facility located at 4500 South Dobson Road in Chandler. Derek was in front of the building carrying 2 duffel bags. Witnesses told police that after night shift employees left, Derek approached a man at a table in the cafeteria, and for an unknown reason he attacked him with a knife, hatchet, and then struck him multiple times in the head with a baseball bat. Another co-worker sitting at the same table was attacked when he stood up to confront Derek. Authorities responded to the scene and found the first victim dead from blunt force trauma injuries. The second victim was transported to a local hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Derek was booked into the Maricopa County Jail on charges of first-degree murder and aggravated assault, and he's been held on a $1 million bond. Derek has a previous felony conviction for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The deceased victim's name has not been released until the next of kin is notified. The motive of the attack is unclear, as the investigation into the matter continues. Pregnant mother 25-year-old Ivy Marie Lewis is accused of murdering a 3-year-old son after punishing him for urinating on a mattress earlier this month. At 7:35 p.m. on the 12th of February, authorities responded to a 911 call from an acquaintance of the suspect. He found that the child was unresponsive and cold to touch in the apartment they shared in Tacoma, Washington. Detectives said they found multiple injuries to the boy's chest, side, arms and legs, consistent with being struck by an object. His face was discolored and bruised with several cuts, and he had burn marks all over his face. Dried blood splatter was found on the walls nearby. It was also noted that there were several small marks on the victim's chest, which appeared to coincide with a taser located on the kitchen table. Despite attempting life-saving measures, the child died at the scene. An autopsy confirmed the child died from blunt force trauma to the head. Ivy first claimed that her son ran into the wall several times and hit his head, which he did regularly, but later admitted that she used meth days before and had spanked the child with a belt and an electrical cable for having wet the bed. The man who called 911 told police he had gone to the apartment after watching the Super Bowl to hang out. When he arrived, he found that the child was unresponsive and immediately sought help. Later in the police interview, he claimed that he had seen Ivy hit the boy with an electrical cable as punishment for wetting his bed. Ivy was already under supervision of Child Protective Services, as the child had previously been in foster care from the age of 10 months until 6 months ago. When she was questioned about how she would discipline her sons, she said that she would make the boy stand in the corner for timeout or smack his hand. She admitted to hitting the boy with a belt when she found him hugging a girl. Ivy was unable or unwilling to provide information about other adults who may have had access to the apartment of the children, and declined to provide information about the 16 hours before her son's death. Ivy has another 1-year-old son who was found inside the home and was taken into protective custody. Ivy's been charged with murder, and she's held at the Pierce County Jail on a $2 million bond. Ivy has an extensive criminal history, including 11 prior arrests and 2 prior felony convictions, unlawful possession of a stolen vehicle, and unlawful possession of a firearm. The investigation into the matter continues. 3 teenage girls, including one who was 6 months pregnant, were fatally shot Saturday night in Texas by a man who then killed himself in an apparent murder-suicide. A 12-year-old girl said her mother's 38-year-old boyfriend sexually assaulted her and shot 3 other teens inside the house, located at 2013 2nd Street in Galena Park. The girl and a 1-year-old niece escaped to a neighbour's house to call for help. Galena Park police found the bodies of 3 girls, aged 19, 14 and 13, dead with gunshot wounds inside the house. Police recovered a gun next to the 38-year-old man who was found dead inside a master bedroom from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Officials have not released the identity of the shooter or the teen victims. However, family members identified the slain sisters as 13-year-old Melanie Torres and 19-year-old Sayora Gill, who was 6 months pregnant. A 14-year-old girl, Laisha Perez, a friend of the family, also died. Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez said the man shot a pregnant 19-year-old girl and 2 younger teens and sexually assaulted a 12-year-old girl. He said after that, he told the 12-year-old girl to go ahead and run from the house. She ran out of the residence without any clothing, trying to seek assistance. She ran to a nearby house with her 1-year-old niece and called police. The teen's mother was not at home at the time. The 12-year-old girl was treated at a nearby hospital. A 31-year-old Springfield, Missouri man was sentenced to more than 2 decades behind bars earlier this week for fatally stabbing his estranged wife at a national park in 2020. Investigators said that on the 20th of May 2020, Dylan met his estranged wife, 29-year-old Brittany Gorman, at the Buck Hollow access area within the Ozark National Scenic Riverways. While there, they both got into an argument over their 3 children aged 5, 7 and 10, and $2,000 in COVID-19 stimulus funds owed to her. Dylan fatally stabbed her multiple times in the chest before dumping her body in a remote location. The following day, park rangers found Brittany's pickup truck, as well as items at the scene that indicated that she may have been injured. Dylan maintained to both Brittany's family and law enforcement that she was missing and suggested it was due to her drug connections. Later that month, on the 30th of May, Dylan confessed that he stabbed Brittany and led authorities to her body along the Jacks Fork River. Dylan had reportedly planned to kill Brittany for months. Dylan was charged with murder and tampering with physical evidence. On the 10th of May 2022, Dylan pleaded guilty to murder. On the 14th of February 2023, Dylan was sentenced to 21 years and 10 months in prison without the possibility of parole. In a tribute to Brittany, family and friends described her as a stay-at-home mum who truly enjoyed raising her 3 children who meant the world to her. She was full of life with an outgoing personality. She enjoyed listening to music, drawing colours, and doing her makeup. She cherished the time she spent with her family and looked forward to family outings. Her most memorable moments were boating and tubing on the lake. A 36-year-old man from Blue Creek, Ohio is behind bars for allegedly holding his estranged 44-year-old wife against her will and beating her, causing serious injuries. According to the Scioto County Sheriff's Office, on Tuesday the 14th of February, a female victim whose name remains anonymous showed up at the office covered in blood with multiple injuries, asking to file a report. The woman told deputies that Matthew Shepard assaulted her several times with a taser, punched her in the face, and kicked her all over her body. She also said that she was choked twice and had cuts on her hands from a knife. The woman was taken to the South Ohio Medical Center for treatment. According to the sheriff's office, the victim suffered bruising, cuts, a black eye, a broken hand, and a dislocated shoulder from the assault. Matthew was arrested later that day without incident At his home in the 500 block of Township Highway 88, where deputies recovered a taser and a knife that was allegedly used during the assault. Matthew's being charged with assault and kidnapping, and he's held at the Scioto County Jail on a $120,000 bond. The Tulsa, Oklahoma police are investigating a case of suspected abuse and homicide after a woman called to report her grandson had been missing for several years and was likely dead, and that her granddaughter had reportedly been abused. On the 27th of January, the grandmother informed Tulsa police about a missing 11-year-old grandson and said her 13-year-old granddaughter had been living with her since September after her daughter Camille Lewis left the team with her. The 13-year-old was reportedly skin and bones from malnutrition. Camille allegedly told her mother that her 11-year-old son was dead. The 13-year-old girl told authorities that her mother and stepfather, John Miles, locked her and her brother in separate closets for days at a time without food and beat them multiple times with belts and cords. She said they were forced to use bags and cups as a toilet. She told detectives that she and her brother would often be forced to sleep in a doghouse in the backyard and exercise in very cold weather. John reportedly offered to give the girl food in exchange for inappropriate acts. The girl said that she and her brother started getting abused in November of 2020, and it ended in September of 2022 when she moved in with her grandmother. The girl said that in March of 2021, she heard her mother crying and begging her brother to wake up. She said Camille told her that her brother had a seizure and died, and they didn't take him to the hospital because they didn't want to get into trouble. Camille allegedly told her daughter that John and his cousin buried her brother in a nearby park. The couple began to fear that the grave was too shallow, so they dug him up, brought him back to the house, placed him in a barrel and set him alight, and dumped his ashes in a storm drain. Police arrested Camille on the 7th of February, and she allegedly admitted to abusing the children. She also reportedly said her son had run away 2 years ago and had not been seen since. John was arrested the next day, but he denied the allegations. They're both in custody on charges of abuse and neglect. Their bond set at $600,000. Tulsa police said they're investigating the case as a homicide, but the boys' remains have not been found. Charges could change as the investigation into the matter continues. A fast food employee is behind bars after he allegedly opened fire at a customer in the drive-through lane following an argument in Gulfport, Mississippi on Thursday night. 33-year-old Eddie Lewis Smith is charged with 1 count of aggravated assault and 1 count of possession of a weapon after felony conviction. The incident occurred at around 8 p.m. on Thursday the 16th of February. Officers were assisting a stranded motorist near Middle Driveway and Highway 49 when bystanders flagged them down to report a physical altercation that was occurring around the corner at Burger King. As officers approached the scene, they heard 2 gunshots and then witnessed Eddie on top of the victim. Investigators said that Eddie and the customer got into an argument while speaking through the intercom. Eddie then walked out the back door of the Burger King and the victim got out of his car and the two got into a physical fight. Eddie then retrieved a handgun and fired 2 shots. One hit the victim and the other struck Eddie's hand. Both Eddie and the victim were transported to a nearby hospital for treatment. The victim is reportedly in a stable condition. Eddie was then transferred to the Harrison County Detention Center, where he's been held in lieu of a $300,000 bond. 30-year-old Christina Marie Rice of Indian Trail, North Carolina, will spend the rest of her days behind bars for beating and killing a newborn son in 2019. On the 15th of February, she was convicted of first-degree murder and felony abuse inflicting serious bodily injury and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At 6:50 a.m. on Sunday the 17th of October 2019, paramedics responded to a home at 5906 Carolina Manor Court after Christina's husband placed a 911 call after he found his wife on the upstairs bathroom floor bleeding profusely. When first responders arrived, they found blood but did not find any cuts on her body. Then medics saw blood near a closet in the bedroom and a placenta in the trash can, but Christina denied that she had delivered a baby. Inside the closet, however, medics located a newborn boy tightly wrapped from head to toe in a blanket, and the infant was hiding inside a trash bag. Paramedics performed CPR on the child and found a faint pulse. Christina and the child were transported to the Novant Health Matthews Medical Center for further treatment, but the child died hours later. The Union County Sheriff's Office said the child weighed 7 pounds at birth and was born healthy. Christina's husband was reportedly unaware of her pregnancy. He became worried when he was woken up while sleeping downstairs after he heard what sounded like someone falling upstairs, which is when he found Christina covered in blood. The baby boy suffered a skull fracture, facial contusions and rib fractures, and died due to asphyxiation. Authorities said that Christina intended to conceal the pregnancy and had not sought prenatal care. A 24-year-old China Grove, North Carolina man is behind bars after he allegedly kidnapped a woman with the intention of killing and mutilating her. On the 15th of February, deputies responded to a report of a woman had been attacked. She told deputies that Hunter Chase Nance came up to her at the Circle K gas station along North Main Street and the two exchanged phone numbers. Later that day, she said he offered to pick her up and take her back to his house on Peaceful Lane. She said that when they got to his house, he locked the door and he attacked her with a knife. She managed to fight him off and run from the scene with minor injuries before alerting the police. Hunter was then taken into custody and interviewed. Hunter said he planned to kill the female for the thrill. He told investigators that he chose the victim randomly and planned to mutilate her and leave the body out for other people to see. He also told authorities that he wanted to kill others as he was interested in cannibalism. Hunter was charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment and assault with a deadly weapon. He's held at the Rowan County Jail on a $600,000 bond. 57-year-old James Perillo Jr. was arrested on the 7th of February in Burlington County, New Jersey, after a woman he allegedly kidnapped escaped from the residence they shared. The woman said she first met James, who she knew by the name of Brett Parker, at a gas station in New Mexico in February of 2022, and agreed to give him a ride to Arizona. She reportedly said she was in a voluntary relationship with the man for about a month when he allegedly physically assaulted her while they were in California, at which point she felt unable to leave the relationship. James reportedly took the woman's phone and debit cards and isolated her from her family. The two arrived in New Jersey sometime in December and were staying in a rented room in Bass River for about 2 weeks when she managed to escape following an argument with James, during which time he allegedly beat and choked her. The victim ran to a gas station nearby. The woman bolted the door to the gas station and reportedly told the gas station attendant she had been kidnapped for about a year. Footage from the station security camera shows James following the woman to the gas station and attempting to open the door, then leaving when he found it locked. The gas station attendant called state police, who apprehended James a short time later after he was seen down a road nearby. James has been charged with kidnapping, criminal restraint, strangulation and aggravated assault. He also faces charges of hindering apprehension, obstruction and refusing to provide a DNA sample. He is held at the Burlington County Jail without bond. A 52-year-old suspect is behind bars after 6 people are dead after a series of shootings in Tate County, Mississippi. Richard Dale Crum has been charged with first-degree murder, with additional charges for the other victims expected to be filed in the coming days. He's held at the Tate County Jail without bond. The shooting started at around 11 a.m. on Friday the 17th of February and spanned over multiple locations in the small rural town of Arca Butler. The initial murder charge was for the killing of 59-year-old Chris Eugene Boyce. The gunman first entered the Express Mart convenience store, and as he exited, he fatally shot Chris while he was sitting in the driver's seat of a pickup truck parked outside the store. Chris's brother was in the truck with him at the time and he fled on foot. Richard chased the other brother through a wooded area before he escaped unharmed. The suspect then drove about 3 miles from the store to a home where his ex-wife, 60-year-old Deborah Crum, lived. He ran up to the porch and busted his way in armed with a shotgun and 2 handguns. Deborah's boyfriend, 64-year-old George Drain, fought with Richard before Richard smashed him in the head with the butt of a gun, leaving George bleeding and dazed. Richard then fatally shot Deborah in the head and told George not to move or make any noise or he'll be killed next. Deputies located Richard outside his home, where he was arrested without incident. Behind his residence, investigators found 2 handymen slain by gunfire, identified as 59-year-old John Rory and 76-year-old Charles Manuel. One was in the road and the other in an SUV. Inside a neighbouring home, they discovered the bodies of Richard's stepfather, 73-year-old George McCain, and George's sister, 78-year-old Linda McCain. Investigators believe that Richard has no connection to the victim at the convenience store. His motive is not yet known, and he acted alone, authorities said. The Tate County Sheriff's Office said it's in very early stages of the investigation, as further charges are pending. A teenage boy was shot to death outside a church in Gary, Indiana on Wednesday afternoon. At around 12:15 p.m. on the 15th of February, authorities responded to 1351 Lincoln Street for a welfare check after a passerby spotted a person laying face down on the sidewalk in front of the Power and Light Church. When officers arrived, they found an unresponsive child suffering from multiple gunshot wounds, and he was later pronounced dead at the scene. The Lake County, Indiana coroner identified the victim as 13-year-old Ori Dodson. He lived about 2 miles away. His cause of death was from gunshot wounds, and his death was ruled a homicide. His mother, Latrice Dodson, said, "I couldn't do nothing but scream and holler, because that's my baby. He didn't deserve this." She said he was murdered after leaving home following a dispute on social media. They chased him from 15th and Grant to right here on 15th and Lincoln at this church, and they killed my baby, she said. I guess he walked out the back door and he was FaceTiming them, arguing with them, and I think they seen his background and what was going on, and they found him. I just told him to stay in the house. Ori, stay in the house, she added. If you'll just listen to me, he'll be alive right now today. Investigation by the Gary Metro Homicide Unit is ongoing. No further information about any suspect or suspects has been released to date. Authorities are investigating the fatal shooting of a 25-year-old woman in a vehicle over the weekend. At 6:56 a.m. on the 18th of February, Oswego police in Illinois identified the woman as 25-year-old Anissa Allen Williams. Officers were told that Anissa shot herself while driving on the highway. A passenger is said to have taken over the vehicle and drove it to the 100 block of Presidential Boulevard, where they both lived, and called police. When police arrived at the residence, they found Anissa unresponsive on the ground outside the driver's side of the vehicle with a gunshot wound. Officers provided medical assistance until paramedics arrived, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. Police were unable to determine the location where the gunshot had occurred. During the investigation into Anissa's death, the passenger of the car, 26-year-old Alexia Tellers, battered 2 police officers. She was arrested and charged with 2 counts of aggravated battery against a peace officer. She's held at the Kendall County Jail in Yorkville pending a bond hearing. Oswego police are asking anyone with information on the incident to contact Crime Stoppers. 2 Portsmouth, Ohio parents are behind bars and are accused of abusing twin infants. 20-year-old Cody Alexander Ronald Allen and 27-year-old Ellen Carter are charged with 2 counts of felonious assault and 4 counts of endangering children. On Monday the 20th of February, a social worker from the Nationwide Children's Hospital contacted police about a possible case of abuse after 5-week-old twins were admitted to the hospital's trauma unit after being transferred from Southern Ohio Medical Center. The infants had eye hemorrhages, multiple broken bones in their legs and arms, multiple rib fractures, abrasions to the face including a black eye and bruising. Cody and Sue Ellen were arrested and are both being held at the Scioto County Jail on a $340,000 bond. 2 males and a female were arrested in Madison County, North Carolina over the weekend after allegedly kidnapping and torturing an unidentified person. On the 19th of February, the victim escaped after being tortured and was taken to a hospital for treatment after showing up at a resident's house, saying they had been kidnapped. Madison County Sheriff's Office deputies followed the lead back to a nearby house in East Fork and determined that Patrick Banks, James Angel, and Nicole Sawyer had forcibly trapped the victim in the basement. According to Sheriff Buddy Harwood, the victim's hands, feet and chest were all tied with barbed wire, and the mouth had been taped shut. The chest was reportedly tied to a beam of the residence. The victim had also been reportedly punched and kicked in the head, hit in the head with firearms and a crowbar, and sliced by multiple knives, causing numerous lacerations to the victim's face and hands, and had crosses carved into their face and body. The 3 suspects were taken into custody and charged with assault with a deadly weapon, inflicting serious bodily injury with intent to kill, kidnapping, and possession of a weapon of mass destruction. Patrick was additionally charged with possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. On Tuesday the 21st of February, 28-year-old Nakira Grant of Bridgeton, New Jersey, was sentenced to life in prison without parole after she was convicted of killing a toddler son, then dismembering and burning his body in 2019. Nakira was found guilty of murder, desecration of human remains, endangering the welfare of a child, tampering with evidence, and false public alarm. At 6:36 p.m. on the 8th of February 2019, Nakira told police that a 23-month-old son, Daniel Griner Jr., had been abducted, so multiple law enforcement agencies launched a search for the toddler. At 3 a.m. that same night, her child's dismembered and burnt remains were found in a purse and trash bags, buried beneath the shed of the family's home at 21 Woodland Drive, and Nakira was taken into custody. Nakira told investigators that she hit her son because he would not eat or listen to her. She admitted to striking her child so hard that it left bruises on his face. After striking the child, she said that she didn't call for help, but placed her son in a stroller and left him alone. She said that her son also fell down the stairs, but she didn't seek help. When detectives confronted Nikira about the abduction report, she told them that she was pushing a toddler in a stroller and had her infant strapped to her chest while she was walking to a deli. She said that a stranger went after her and knocked her to the ground and repeatedly kicked her in the head and right side. She said that when she looked up, the stroller and Daniel were gone. Officers soon found the stroller a few blocks away, containing only a pair of red sneakers. During subsequent interviews with police, her story began to change. After her son's remains were discovered, an autopsy revealed that the child had been beaten to death. The toddler's skull had been broken into 74 pieces, and that the child's body had been burnt in an oven. Nikira admitted to burning and dismembering her son's body, but denied intentionally killing him. Her attorney said that the killing was accidental, and as a result of postpartum psychosis. Prosecutors said that Nikira made phone calls from jail, which recorded her saying that she did what she did to Daniel to cover up the bruises on his body. A woman was indicted on an arson charge about a month after she allegedly intentionally set fire to a Springbrook apartment complex in Springville, New York, causing large-scale damage. On the 22nd of February, 36-year-old Sarah Lilly was arraigned on one count of second-degree arson. At around 10:30 p.m. on the 23rd of January, Erie County deputies responded to the apartment building at 109 North Buffalo Street about a fire. Multiple volunteer fire companies responded to the scene to put out the blaze. Authorities said that some structural parts of the building and many units suffered extensive damage where some were destroyed. Investigators said that no one was injured in the fire, but several residents were displaced. After speaking with witnesses and gathering evidence, detectives arrested Sarah the following day on suspicion of arson. If Sarah is convicted, she faces up to 25 years in prison. According to the authorities, Sarah also has a criminal case in court regarding a burglary offence. At 5:57 p.m. on the 20th of October, Sarah allegedly knowingly entered and remained unlawful inside a store on the 300 block of South Cascade Drive in Springville with the intent to commit a crime. She's accused of stealing $38.04 in merchandise. Sarah was reportedly banned from the store due to a previous shoplifting incident that occurred in February of 2022. Sarah's been held at the Erie County Jail without bond. A commenter named Ash Marie posted on the Erie County Sheriff's Office Facebook page about Sarah. She said, "I know she used to work at a local bar, and I know at some point in the last few years she lost custody of her daughters. I know she started using meth and started working outside the bar. She's been in my work multiple times, stealing along with other businesses around town. She threatens people, harasses people. I don't know. I think she's hurt, damaged, more trauma than anyone probably knows, bottling it up and coping in all the wrong ways. But there's a good person somewhere in there. She hasn't been this way forever. She has to find the want and willpower to be better, to do better. Hopefully she'll accept help while in prison and not just find drugs in prison. Only time will tell," she wrote. 3 18-year-old men are behind bars for the death of 15-year-old Madison Guestwine. The incident occurred in Madison's bedroom at an apartment complex in the 500 block of Peachtree Station Circle in Peachtree City, Georgia. At around 6 a.m. on Tuesday the 21st of February, Madison's mother discovered her daughter's unresponsive body laying on her bed with a gunshot wound to her head and immediately contacted 911. She told the dispatcher that her daughter was bleeding from the head. She said that when she entered her daughter's bedroom, the window was open and the blinds were a mess. She told the dispatcher that she can't get any response from her and that there's a lot of blood on the bed. She also said that her son's asleep in his room. The dispatcher instructed the mother how to administer CPR until medics arrived, but she was unable to be revived and was declared dead at the scene. The next day, police arrested 3 18-year-old suspects who were described as acquaintances of Madison. Justice Smith, Jacobian Brown and Yeshua Mathis, all of Fayetteville, Georgia, were each charged with murder. Authorities said that a final cause of death is pending determination by the medical examiner, but an injury to Madison's head appears to be consistent with a gunshot wound. A motive behind the attack has not yet been determined. Peachtree City Police Chief Matt Myers said, "This was not a random attack. They knew whose apartment they were at, and it was in some way related to matters between these individuals. The investigation into the matter continues." A 38-year-old man is behind bars for allegedly killing his stepfather. At 7:42 p.m. on Sunday the 19th of February, deputies were called to the 4000 block of Madison Lane in Augusta, Georgia in reference to a mental evaluation. When deputies arrived at the property, they were met with Marcus Banks. Marcus told deputies there was a dead body in the home and he wanted it gone. Deputies detained Marcus while they searched the house. While searching the residence, they found 79-year-old Clarence Flanagan's unresponsive body in the back bedroom, with multiple stab wounds to his upper torso. The coroner pronounced Clarence dead at 8:56 p.m. Investigators said that Clarence was an emergency medical specialist, and Marcus Hill, schizophrenic and homeless, turned up to his home unannounced. Marcus confronted the victim, beat him and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest with a black-handled knife with a 5-inch blade wall inside the house. The victim had received threats from Marcus before, but nothing that turned physical. Marcus is held at the Charles B. Webster Detention Centre and is charged with murder and weapon possession charges. Marcus has a lengthy criminal history dating back to 2006, including 4 criminal trespass charges and 3 obstruction of law enforcement charges, one of those a felony back in 2021. Other offences include robbery, shoplifting, simple battery and simple assault charges. Since April of 2022, the Sheriff's Office has been to Clarence's home 6 times, 2 for a follow-up, a disturbance call, trespassing, domestic violence and a welfare check in October. The investigation into the matter continues. Police were investigating the fatal shooting of a man in Cleveland, Ohio on Tuesday afternoon. At around 1:15 p.m. on the 21st of February, a postal worker heard gunfire and found an unresponsive man with multiple gunshot wounds to his head and body lying on the ground of a driveway at 1433 East 81st Street. Authorities were contacted and responded to the scene, where the victim, later identified as 25-year-old Terry Chandler, was pronounced dead at the scene. Residents nearby reported seeing an SUV fleeing the area, however they were uncertain of the colour. No arrests have been made to date, and the investigation remains ongoing. Anyone with information regarding this incident is urged to contact Crime Stoppers. A Florida couple have been arrested for the sexual abuse of 2 young girls. Stephen Cribb and Laura Dietz, both 29, of Mentmore Circle in Deltona, were arrested on the evening of Wednesday the 22nd of February, following a swift investigation by the Volusia County Sheriff's Office that began earlier that morning. While questioned, Stephen and Laura allegedly admitted to sexually abusing 2 young girls under the age of 12. The abuse occurred multiple times over the course of several years. The defendants are known to the victims, but the nature of their relationship is being withheld to protect the victims' identities. Stephen and Laura are being held at the Volusia County Branch Jail and are each charged with 2 counts of sexual battery of a child under 12. There's no indication of any other victims in the case. 29-year-old Sterling Trevin smiled during his arraignment on Tuesday on murder and assault charges after a man and woman died, while 2 men suffered critical injuries in a quadruple stabbing. The incident occurred at 8:45 p.m. on the 19th of February at a recovery home for drug and alcohol addicts located at 9375 Central Valley Road Northeast in Bremerton, Washington. Authorities were alerted to the property when 911 callers said multiple people had been stabbed and the assailant was still inside the residence. One of the occupants of the house who called 911 said he was barricaded in his room disconnected the call, saying he was jumping out the window. Another resident who called 911 crawled out of his bedroom window and onto the roof of the house. Within 4 minutes of the calls, deputies from the Kitsap County and a state trooper arrived outside the property. As they approached their home on foot, they heard a noise nearby and found Sterling splattered with blood crawling away in the brush, clutching a bloody butcher knife. He was apprehended without incident. Additional deputies made entry into the home and found 2 bodies and 2 severely injured men. The 2 victims who died from their stab wounds have been identified as 51-year-old William Faust and 59-year-old Retha Price. Of the surviving victims, one was taken to Tacoma General Hospital with multiple stab wounds to his head and neck, and he was intubated in the intensive care unit at the hospital. The other man was flown to Harborview Medical Center in Seattle with multiple stab wounds to his abdomen and head, and had to have a finger amputated. A man identified Sterling as the person who had stabbed him. The man said that he and a woman who had come to visit him at the house heard a commotion coming from a room that Sterling shared with one of the murder victims. He heard the victim calling for help and found Sterling stabbing the man. The woman went to help the man and stop the bleeding with a sweatshirt, and Sterling began to stab her and others, the man said. One witness said that 9 people lived at the house and believed there may have been a couple of guests at the residence at the time of the attacks. After hearing the commotion, the man exited the room and saw Sterling bloodied and holding a butcher knife. That man, one of the 911 callers, shut himself inside a room as Sterling unsuccessfully attempted to get inside before escaping out a window to a vehicle. Sterling admitted to using meth that day and he grabbed a knife from the kitchen and attacked people because he believed they were surveilling and recording him without his consent. Sterling was transported to the St. Michael's Medical Center for treatment of minor injuries before he was booked into the Kitsap County Jail on 2 counts of murder in the first degree and 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon in the first degree. In court on Tuesday, Sterling pleaded not guilty to all the charges. Judge Adams approved the state's request for a $4 million bail, on finding that bail is appropriate due to the risk of failure to appear and substantial risk of violence in the community, she said. Sterling's grin was wiped off his face as he exited the courtroom. His trial was set for April. Sterling has an extensive criminal history, including 3 prior felonies. An Iowa man and his girlfriend are behind bars and are accused of failing to provide proper care for the man's father, causing him to die in deplorable conditions. 24-year-old Jacob Shaper and 23-year-old Jocelyn Grisham were arrested on the morning of the 21st of February and are each charged with second-degree murder in the death of 58-year-old Stephen Shaper. At 1:06 a.m. on the 10th of August, authorities responded to an emergency call at a residence located at 228 First Street in West Des Moines. The caller reported that a man was experiencing a medical emergency. Upon arriving at the scene, first responders located Stephen, who was suffering from multiple medical issues and living in deplorable conditions. Medics transported him to the local hospital, where he was later pronounced dead. An immediate investigation was launched into the circumstances surrounding Stephen's death due to his medical ailments and the poor living conditions witnessed in the residence. Detectives obtained evidence indicating that Stephen's caretakers, Jacob and Jocelyn, intentionally or recklessly denied him adequate medical care and living conditions, which resulted in his death. Stephen needed constant care and was unable to leave the bed, get food or bathe himself. First responders said that when they found Stephen, he was laying in a feces and urine-soaked bed with a sore diaper and infected bed sores. He was skin and bones, and his teeth were black and appeared to be rotting out. An autopsy determined that Stephen's cause of death was from sepsis, pneumonia, as well as several other conditions affecting his health of his heart, muscles and bone tissue. Jacob and Jocelyn are held at the Polk County Jail without bond. 2 Florida correction officers were arrested on Tuesday the 21st of February for allegedly throwing scalding hot water on inmates, causing severe burns. Lee County Sheriff's Office correction officers Casey Howe and Enzo Finnemore faced charges of misconduct and battery. Injuries were observed on an inmate housed in direct observation during routine checks. A deputy conducting checks notified a supervisor immediately. The investigation found 3 inmates had first and second degree burns on their chests and arms. Casey and Enzo believed to have been using the water dispenser to throw hot water on inmates to gain compliance. The 2 deputies have been fired. Lee County Sheriff Carmen Machino said that the Sheriff's Office does not tolerate the disgusting and cruel actions of these correction officers. Enzo's employment with the Sheriff's Office began in December of 2021, while Casey started in 2022. Casey was held on a $16,500 bond, while Enzo's was set at $6,500. 43-year-old Clemente Flores Hernandez is accused of fatally shooting his long-time living girlfriend and abducting her grandson last week. At around 8:15 p.m. on Friday, the 24th of February, authorities received a report that her mother had been shot at her home in the 4700 block of Durham Court in Denver, Colorado. Police said the victim's son told authorities that Clemente shot his mother and abducted his son. He reportedly followed Clemente in his vehicle, and Adams County Sheriff's deputies were able to stop Clemente on eastbound Interstate 70 near mile marker 312 using stop sticks. Clemente exited the vehicle with his late girlfriend's grandson in his arms before he was taken into custody. While deputies detained Clemente, police responded to the home on Durham Court and found the victim suffering from a gunshot wound to the head, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. During an interview, the victim's son told police that he and his son were in the basement of the home when his mother told them to come upstairs for dinner. The son reportedly stayed in the basement as the victim's grandson went upstairs. According to police, the son heard gunshots, and when he went upstairs, he found Clemente approaching him with a gun pointed at him. The two struggled over the gun, and Clemente allegedly assaulted his girlfriend's son and pushed him against the wall. The son told police he was unable to breathe, was dizzy, and felt like he was going to lose consciousness. Eventually, the son was able to escape, and he followed Clemente and the victim's grandson in his vehicle before he was stopped by deputies. Police said that the victim's son and grandson did not suffer any serious bodily injury. Clemente faces charges of first-degree murder, first-degree attempted murder, and first-degree kidnapping. The parents of a 4-month-old baby in Michigan are behind bars for allegedly leaving him in the backseat of a car in freezing conditions. The arrest stems from an incident in Grand Haven on the 29th of January. It's alleged that the couple, 32-year-old Philip Nass and 30-year-old Crystal Canals, were in a car that had pulled over on the side of a street and then passed out in the front seat. The car was off, and the baby was in the back seat unsecured in an infant carrier without winter clothing, socks or a blanket. A passerby noticed the car and the occupants and called 911. By the time first responders arrived, the baby's condition had deteriorated. His feet were blue, and his skin was cold to touch. Medics rushed the baby to the Trinity Health Grand Haven for treatment, and he has since recovered. Authorities said that it suspected that drug use contributed to this incident. On the evening of the 22nd of February, detectives secured warrants for the parents' arrest. Officers spotted the couple driving along Beechtree Street that night and were arrested. They each charged with felony abuse of a child, and Philip was additionally charged with 1 count of habitual offender. They both held at the Ottawa County Jail on a $50,000 bond. Authorities said that if the person hadn't called 911, the baby very likely would have died if he remained in the car. Philip has a criminal history, including past convictions for domestic violence, identity theft, home invasion, resisting assaulting, obstructing a police officer, and controlled substance delivery. 30-year-old Alexander Paul Wardell has been arrested for allegedly killing his girlfriend and a dog. At 4:42 p.m. on the 18th of February, Fire Department services responded to a blaze at Cube Smart Self-Storage at 4640 South 900 East in Murray, Utah. After extinguishing the fire, officials located a deceased woman and a dog inside the storage unit where the fire broke out. Authorities identified the woman as 27-year-old Morgan K. Harris and a pet dog Huck. Alexander was identified as a suspect, and he was taken into custody. While questioned by detectives, Alexander allegedly admitted to locking Morgan and Huck in the storage unit before walking away. After he left the area, the storage unit caught fire, and the door remained closed until firefighters were able to pry it open. He's charged with kidnapping, negligent homicide, violation of parole, 2 counts of aggravated assault, possession of a dangerous weapon, and 2 counts of criminal mischief. He's held at the Salt Lake County Jail without bond. Alexander has an extensive criminal history, and he was released on bond a day before the killings. He violated probation on the 16th of February and got out of jail the next day after paying a $5,000 bond. The violation stems from an original charge in December of 2018, when Alexander was found guilty of beating his former girlfriend with a golf club and threatening her with a knife. He spent 220 days in jail before pleading guilty in exchange for a 36-month probation sentence. He's violated probation multiple times with drug and weapon offences, and he spent time in a rehabilitation centre. In August, his probation officer recommended the courts revoke his probation and order his original prison sentence of 5 years. This recommendation was not followed. In a tribute to Morgan, her family said she's always been known for a sweet, shy and kind temperament, being a deep thinker with amazing artistic abilities and always having an infectious giggle. She worked as a model, makeup artist and medical assistant, and had just started a job in Draper. A 28-year-old woman allegedly cut off her 28-year-old boyfriend's penis after he threatened to leak their sex tapes because she refused to sleep with him. The names of the victim and the suspect have not been released. The man was rushed to a hospital after the attack at a hotel in Sibolga, North Sumatra, Indonesia. He is now in intensive care. Police allege that on Saturday the 25th of February, the woman severed his penis after he came onto her, and she was not in the mood. The couple had been in a relationship for about 7 months. They made an appointment to meet at a hotel, and the man asked to have sex, after which the woman refused. When he was denied sex, the man threatened to spread the videos of their intimate activities. Then while he was ready to take a shower, the suspect carried out the attack. She took a knife that belonged to the man and cut off his penis. A receptionist at the hotel said the woman approached him and asked for medical assistance after her boyfriend was bleeding profusely at the scene. The woman's been arrested and is held at the Sibolga police station, but has not been charged. Police said they're waiting to interview the boyfriend. 50-year-old Belinda Miller of Augusta, Georgia is behind bars and is accused of deliberately driving a vehicle into a Popeyes restaurant after biscuits were mistakenly left out of her order. At 7:45 p.m. on Saturday the 18th of February, deputies from the Richmond County Sheriff's Office responded to Popeyes at 450 Walton Way after receiving reports of an accident with potential injuries. The store manager told police that Belinda became upset when she discovered no biscuits were in her order, and that she then drove a 2011 black Toyota RAV4 into the restaurant's east entrance. The manager said that prior to the crash, the restaurant corrected the mistake and gave her the biscuits, but she still was not satisfied. The manager said that the woman threatened staff before the incident, including calling the store and threatening to drive a car into the building. One witness told deputies that she was waiting in line when Belinda told her she better hurry up and get her order because she was coming back in there. Belinda almost struck an 18-year-old employee with a vehicle when she crashed through the doors and walls into the store. She continued driving several feet into the store until her vehicle was stopped by debris. After crashing into the restaurant, Belinda fled the scene and headed south on Gordon Highway. Her SUV was later found at her home with front-end damage. On Wednesday the 22nd of February, Belinda was arrested and charged with first-degree criminal damage to property and aggravated assault. She's held at the Charles B. Webster Detention Centre on a $4,600 bond, as well as a probation hold. This isn't the first time Belinda has rammed a vehicle into a building. In May of 2020, Belinda claimed that she was upset and drunk, and twice rammed a vehicle into the side of a residential building. She drove a RAV4 into the side of an apartment building at Forest Brook Apartments on Damascus Road. The man she was arguing with tried to calm her down after she hit the building the first time. She then backed up and struck the building a second time. In 2018, Belinda pulled the wheel as a man was driving, causing him to veer off the road and into a wooded area. She was also charged with punching him as he drove. She got probation in both cases. A 17-year-old student with special needs faces charges for allegedly attacking a teacher's aide after she confiscated a portable electronic gaming device from him. The incident occurred at around 10 a.m. on Tuesday the 21st of February at Matanzas High School in Palm Beach, Florida. The student became upset and rushed at the teacher's aide, identified as 57-year-old Joan Nadich, after she took his Nintendo Switch game away from him during class. She turned around and caught a glimpse of him from behind before he shoved her, causing her to go airborne for 5 to 6 feet before hitting her head on the ground and losing consciousness. Flagler County Sheriff Rick Staley said, "This could have been a homicide. When you push people like that and they hit their head, you never know the outcome." The student, who's 6'7" and weighs 270 pounds, continued to attack Joan. He repeatedly stomped, kicked and punched the unconscious woman in the back and head while she was on the ground. He then spat on her and threatened to kill her. Other students and staff were able to intervene and restrain the student before deputies arrived. Joan was taken to a local hospital and released, and is believed to have broken ribs and significant bruising. Rick said, "I believe she'll be out of work for at least several weeks, if she ever plans on returning." The student, whose name is not being disclosed because of his age, was charged with felony aggravated battery with bodily harm and was eventually turned over to the Department of Juvenile Justice. He also faces possible school discipline and expulsion. The student asked if he was going to jail while deputies handcuffed him inside the school. When he was told yes, he swore at them and said he didn't want to go to jail, adding that he had more important things to do before accusing them of manhandling him. Police are investigating a murder-suicide that happened in Monroeville, Pennsylvania on Tuesday afternoon. At around 11 a.m. on the 21st of February, emergency crews and SWAT units responded to 440 Ashbury Court after receiving a report of 48-year-old Corey Lee Christian shooting at his 51-year-old wife, India Wright Christian, who was driving a white Mercedes SUV. While authorities made their way there, they found the SUV had crashed into a nearby home's garage at 441 Bay Hill Drive, which intersects the end of Ashbury Court. India was found inside the car in a critical condition, with gunshot wounds to her torso and arm. She was transported to the Forbes Hospital, where she was later pronounced dead. Investigators said the car was associated with the home in Ashbury Court, near where the report of gunfire originated. Police said that after the shooting, Corey then fled to his home in Ashbury Court where the couple lived and barricaded himself inside. After hours of trying to make contact with the man, police forced entry into the house at around 3:30 p.m. and found the man dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. "28-year-old Trent Krieger has been found guilty of killing his 67-year-old grandfather, Robert Earl Huffman Jr., during a fight in Daleville, Indiana in 2021. On Friday the 17th of February, a jury convicted Trent of murder and aggravated battery. The incident occurred in the early morning hours of the 5th of September 2021 in the 9100 block of South Walnut Street. Trent had reportedly been staying in the parked car outside his grandfather's home and drank almost 2 pints of vodka over a 7-hour period. Robert became upset about the amount of alcohol Trent was consuming, so grabbed the keys from him and tried to pull his grandson out of the car when the two began fighting. Trent then struck his grandfather with a steel wheelbarrow, choked him and kicked him. He then nudged a concrete cinder block over Robert's head before he stomped down on it multiple times. At 2:40 a.m, Trent called 911 and said, "My grandpa's outside and I don't feel a pulse. Him and I got into a fight and he lost." A dispatcher then directed Trent how to perform CPR until medics arrived. Robert was pronounced dead at the scene. A forensic pathologist said that Robert sustained 25 fractures to his ribs as a result of the brawl. He was face down on the ground after suffering the injuries and likely suffocated to death. Prosecutors said that Trent stomped on his grandfather's head to finish him off. A friend of Robert, Ed Johnson, testified that Robert was somewhat limited in mobility after having his knees replaced and suffered from diabetes among other ailments. He recalled his friend had limited stamina when they worked together on projects. He once recalled Trent bristled when his grandfather asked for help with a chore. "That's all you live for, to boss me around," Trent reportedly told Robert. Trent is scheduled to be sentenced on the 24th of March and faces between 45 to 65 years for the murder conviction and 3 to 16 years for the aggravated battery conviction. 63-year-old John Ewing of Topeka, Kansas has been found guilty of murdering his ex-girlfriend with an axe in April of 2021. On Friday the 17th of February, John was convicted of murder, aggravated kidnapping, aggravated burglary, criminal threat, and interference with law enforcement for the death of 58-year-old Deborah Stevens. The incident occurred on the morning of the 27th of April 2021 at the Coachlight South Mobile Home Park at 801 Southwest 57th Street. Surveillance video captured John sneaking up on Deborah and approaching her from the back as she leaned into her car. John grabbed her head and neck and forced her to the ground, where he hit her several times with a large flashlight. As Deborah yelled out for help, he moved her into the trailer where he told her, "I will kill you." After pushing her into the trailer, he grabbed an axe and repeatedly struck her in the head. After killing Deborah, John left the mobile home park before returning hours later and contacting authorities about the death. At around 5:30 p.m. that day, deputies from the Shawnee County Sheriff's Office arrived at the trailer. When deputies entered, they found John smoking a cigarette on Deborah's bed, with her lifeless body laying face up next to him. John said he got into an argument with Deborah after she hit him, after she thought he slashed her tires, but he said he only let the air out. John will be sentenced on the 12th of May. A 28-year-old brothel worker was arrested after a dispute between two co-workers escalated into a shooting and an armed standoff with law enforcement officials at the Moonlight Bunny Ranch in Carson City, Nevada. At 9:37 p.m. on Monday the 20th of February, deputies received a report of the dispute, and the 911 caller said they heard gunshots. Upon arrival of deputies, they heard several more gunshots, and they evacuated the brothel. During their investigation, the Lyon County Sheriff's Office learned that Bunny Ranch employee Savannah Henderson, also known as Tiara Tay, was responsible for firing the gun and then retreated into a room inside the business. The crisis negotiations team, special weapons and tactics, and technology team reportedly responded to the scene, and a standoff ensued. At around 12:33 a.m, the Sheriff's Office said Savannah was taken into custody without further incident. Savannah is charged with 2 counts of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, possession of a controlled substance, discharging a firearm where others may be endangered, and obstructing resisting a peace officer. She was held at the Lyon County Jail, but was released after paying $86,140 in bail.